Ready?
Yep.
We're live.
Hello, hello, hello. If you can see and or hear us, preferably the latter more than the former, do let us know. If hopefully everyone's doing well today.
Bonjour, mon petit fleur.
Yes.
I am so very happy to see you all. It's going to be a fun one today because it's Bretonnia. A long time coming, I think.
Yeah, it really is. I don't remember the last time we had a dedicated Bretonnia episode.
Yeah, it's been a while. So we're not just doing this one, obviously, because our last vote ended in pretty much a direct draw, which means this week we are doing Morgiana le Fay, and next week we're doing Bertrand le Brigand, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited for both of these. Two really, really good characters that cover very different aspects of what it is to live in Bretonnia. Kind of a more Fay side of things, and then a much more mundane side with the following week. But should be some really, really good stuff.
Yeah, it should be. I'm looking forward to this episode in particular because it's a fine example, I think, given where we're almost certain to go, of what Lorebeards does, which is taking a look at the existing lore, saying, yep, it contradicts. It contradicts a lot. And then having a discussion about what this means and which parts is most likely to be the best story for whatever story you want to do at home, or can we just combine it all and make it all true? And I think the answer, as is often the case with these things, is yeah, we can.
Yeah, this one is definitely the most egregious example of Games Workshop writing something and just disagreeing with itself constantly and being like, yeah, we're never going to resolve this. We're just going to blow the world up and move on.
This is one. This is going to be one that I think many of you already know where the controversies lie for Morgiana ahead. Many of you don't. And for those of you that don't, you might find some of what happens through the course of this stream a bit surprising, or possibly a bit, really, is this how it unfolded? And the answer is going to be yes it is. And no, it's not really surprising. Games Workshop does this a lot. Its writers contradict themselves in lots of ways. Sometimes they do it on purpose because they've got a new direction and goal that they wish to pursue. Sometimes they just do it by mistake because they haven't either done the research or they didn't know that another book had said something that they were then heavily contradicting. In this case, it's a heavy contradiction, which you're going to see come live before you like a pretty flower.
Yeah, and this one's particularly interesting because there is oftentimes when we deal with a controversial aspect of the lore and Black Library aspects get involved, the Black Library parts can make things more confusing or don't reinforce the things they should. But this is a rare instance where I am pretty damn sure, if memory serves me, the Black Library kind of accidentally does what it's supposed to do, which is funny. And you may be like, what the hell is he talking about? And you'll see
you're going to find
just
out
a little while.
Because we have things to cover in this one.
Yeah, but once again, very excited to get into this because I really like Morgiana le Fay. She is a underappreciated character, in my opinion. She's done all sorts of fun little things, and she is critical to the narrative of Bretonnia in a lot of important fashions that is easy to miss because a lot of people get so caught up with like the knights and the peasantry and all the stuff that they forget the actual most important character, like from an IRL
Morgiana.
Perspective. It's Morgiana herself.
Yeah,
like she's way more important than the king, way more important than like anybody else.
Yep, agreed. So before we get going, as always, we'll be taking a few super chats before we dive in, and as always, we'll be taking our super chats in batches as we go because we've got quite a lot that we'd like to cover, and if we stopped every 2 seconds for super chats, we would never get through all the goodies that are about to come up.
So with that, let's go ahead and grab the ones right here at the start, and we can kind of get things up and rolling.
I think so.
Tablam! Good lorelings.
Interesting.
Two Bretonnia streams. Tablom's like trying to organize the masses here. Good luck with that, Tablom.
I mean, you did a pretty good job.
Let's try to keep the societal questions for next week in Bertrand and use this one for mystical, noble, historical things in majority title itself.
And if, for those of you who are not frequent watchers, if it wasn't for Tablam, we almost certainly wouldn't be doing 2 streams. But Tablam dropped in with some of the most mighty of super chats and basically bribed us, so we're doing it. It's
that's
happening.
right. Yeah, that's very true.
So thank you for
Oblivion, that. What story thread / themes of gnomish society would you weave into the old world if you were to add events concerning
the enemy
them?
Within. So Glimdwaro, yeah. So Vivid Oblivion's asking how to. Yeah, you're clearly 100% awake, Sotek. So I'll cover this one. So what could we do to weave gnomes into the enemy within plot? In particular, we could have events concerning Glimdwaro. Now, Glimdwaro as a gnomish hold is minced. It's been absolutely destroyed, and it was destroyed about 100 years ago by Grom the Paunch. Go check our Grom stream if you want to know more about that. I would say, Vivid Oblivion, that if you want a really nice, clean answer for how to do this, check out LAWhammer, because we use the gnomes extensively in 2 components to the storyline. The first component is what's happening up north, where where we have an entire aside with, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's an aside with gnomes, Gotrek and Felix, Skaven, Thankwall, all manner of craziness up there. And the gnomes are a central component of what goes down. Now, when we come back from being up in the north back down to Altdorf, Glimdwaro does, in our threads, pop up, but not in a way that you might expect, because we deal with it in flashbacks as to why Glimdwaro is in the state that it's in today. And those flashbacks provide an answer that most people didn't expect, meaning that Glimdwaro in our game is central. I don't want to provide spoilers, and spoilers are sadly also the best answer for this. So if you want answers, I would suggest diving over into the LAWhammer Discord and just asking people how they work, and they'll tell you the answers without having to dive into the episodes if you haven't watched them yourself. There's also a really good set of summary notes up on the LAWhammer Discord if you want to just basically read what happened in some of those episodes, because the gnomes are absolutely central, both a southern borough with Glimdwaro and a northern borough with Menglithrutha. So yes, is the answer to that one.
Let's see. Stephen Lucas, difference between the Fay Enchantress and the lady connections. So
yeah.
So the Fay Enchantress is always portrayed as like the head prophet, or like the head herald of
the herald of the lady. Yeah, totally.
She's the big boss of the faith and the lady's will, and she speaks on behalf of the lady, whereas the lady herself is like an actual god.
If you want to imagine this through the lens of the Empire, what you've basically asked is the Grand Theogenist of Sigmar versus Sigmar. Are there connections? And the answer is, well, yeah. Because one is effectively the head of the cult and the core driver of Sigmarism inside the Empire, and the other one is, well, Sigmar the god. And it's basically the same here. The Fay Enchantress is the head of the cult, such as it is the driver of the faith of the lady in Bretonnia, and the other is the lady herself.
Let's see here. Bloomble. The one time I'm proud to identify as the 1%. Also, Sotek, in your opinion, what did King Balaam do to get deposed by Morgiana, even though he had to be her chosen grand not to be king to begin with? Andy, you know my homebrew theory on the matter. So for those unaware, and we'll talk a little bit about this, because this unfortunately is treated as kind of more of like a little side note about Morgiana. But as the Fay Enchantress, she has the authority and the ability to basically just remove a king from office. Like, she could just show up and be like, nope, you're terrible at this job, you suck, get the hell out of here. But so the only time that it's mentioned explicitly that she does this in history is when she removes King Balaam the Brave and deposes him, and like immediately picks a successor because he wasn't doing a very good job. But there is the kind of the question of, what was Balaam the Brave doing that was so bad that had him exiled? Because he wasn't killed. He was thrown out. and exiled, and is still remembered as Balam the Brave, which to me suggests that he wasn't like evil and he didn't like become horribly corrupt, but he was doing something that the lady did not approve of, which if it was up to me, I think what would be the obvious story would be like, oh, he was corrupted by chaos, which I think would be too on the nose. Because he is a Grail Knight. He is someone that is drunk from the lady.
You don't really get corrupted when you're a Grail Knight.
What I would think would probably be the most interesting story was that there is something about his nature, something about the way he leads, especially if he's the brave. I would think there is something where the lady foresees that there's a challenge coming, that because he is this supposedly brave, focused on taking things on head on, that he would have been a threat to the lady's designs. Not that he was like even a bad king, but that he would have not been the king that she felt Bretonnia needed at that time. So he is removed and someone else is put in the position, because that almost kind of has that elfy political aspect to it. And
elf?
Elf. Yeah. And I think that makes for a potentially interesting story from the perspective of Bretonnians, of that Bretonnians would see this as like this thing. But if Balam accepts it and simply steps down and leaves, it would be such a fascinating story compared to literally everywhere else in the old world. Like imagine the rest of the old world hearing about a king that some wizard showed up and was like, hey man, you gotta go. And he's like, okay, and just steps down from the throne. There's no civil war, there's no great conflict, and he just leaves.
Where's the war in my Warhammer? But yes, I'm not going to give a story here, but I am going to say that there is a hinter at the very least as to what story was being suggested by the I've already heard the particular theory that the super chat was referencing. And I'm going to send you all the way over to, as and when you've got time, and if you haven't checked it already, the Made with LAWhammer Frontalier head witches, which are head witches that are in Bretonnia that were just made up over in LAWhammer with one of our marvelous patrons, who is the person who just posed this question, Saurus. And in there's an entire setup for potentially a very strong answer to that question. So I've just posted that link directly into the chat. So hopefully you should be able to follow through on that if you wish to do so.
Stephen Lucas asks, was there a theme, or what was the theme, if there was one, to the old lore of the lady spells?
So we'll probably go into this a little bit later. But if we go back to, say, the 5th edition, there's a bunch of unique spells that were directly for just Morgiana le Fay. And there's also this broader idea that the lady's got her own stuff going on. And the answer is sort of yes, and it's fairy tales. One of Morgiana le Fay's spells was, I'll turn you into a frog.
Yep.
That's it. It turns you into a frog. That got turned into, in the 6th edition, you lose a wound. It's pretty pish, actually, by comparison. The 6th edition write-up, whilst I love the 6th edition book, it is, in terms of the characters, much, much more, there's this special rule, this special rule, this special rule that cuts out all of the cool, gribbly details that came from the previous editions. But I'll explain that a little bit later. There's a really good reason why it does. But broadly speaking, the entirety of the lore of the lady, so to speak, is broadly based on fairy tales and Arthurian legend, and what cool, funky things did witches do in that.
Mm-hmm. Dumbo, should/do other non-chaos gods create/bless supercharged warriors like our beloved Grail Knights? So I have a strong opinion on this one, actually, which is that unless there is a exception that comes up for races that have yet to be revealed, such as Nippon and Koresh and etc., of the factions we know about, I would say the answer should be a heavy no. And the reason it should be a heavy no is because their gods are not in the physical world, where the lady is.
Yeah, the lady is special. And the lady is directly involved with the material realm in a way that other gods rarely are. Now, some of them might make the occasional appearance. Hello, I have arrived. Goodbye now. That's very different to the lady, who is a constant, pervasive character within the history of Bretonnia that is met by every Grail Knight. They all meet her. They all meet a god, and that god directly blesses them. There is no other story like this in Warhammer. There is not a similar story where a god is sitting there giving direct benefits to those who have proven themselves through whatever route they have taken worthy. Yes, there are other gods out there, like the Maw, for example, is a very physical, material thing that's there. Go check our stream on the Maw if you want to know more about that. But that's not this sort of god. It's not the sort of god that's just handing out goodies and beanies according to whatever is happening at hand. I would say, no, I hard agree, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't create another example of it. But it would need to do something different to just the standard divinities that we find in the Warhammer world. The Lady of the Lake has got her own difference in place, and that is she is materially in the world, often working from her own pocket realm, but we'll be discussing that a bit later as well. Her own little section of the Aether that's just hers, that she can take people in and out of without all of the normal issues that the Aether presents, i.e. you've entered the realm of chaos, it's time to go mad now. She doesn't have this particular issue. In fact, I would argue that this goddess is remarkably powerful in a way that very few other gods are, and it speaks to what the gods used to be back in time before all the gods were banned from the material realm by Azurin, assuming you believe that myth. So I hard agree.
Yep. I actually think that the one of the fun things about the Fay Enchantress is that she is, if in many ways, a early example of what Games Workshop would later choose to do with Sigmar in Age of Sigmar, where or when a lot of the gods in Age of Sigmar, where the whole system is about them like bestowing their godly essences onto mortals, like giving a little piece of themselves to mortals in different ways. And the lady is actually she was way ahead of the game. She was way
totally
ahead of the game.
And possibly she is in the Warhammer scale of things as well, to a degree slightly behind the game, in that maybe the gods used to do things like this much more often when they were still manifest in the material realm. So Age of Sigmar is not an entirely original tale in how it handles these things. It's not like Age of Sigmar's gone, let's just create all this cool shit from nothing. No, not at all. All of these things had already been established inside the Warhammer world, and Age of Sigmar's pulled all of those together and said, what happens when the gods are back in amongst us again and doing shit? And the answer is, well, they do the same shit that they were doing before.
Morning to Crescent. Why are so many wizards, Le Fay included, barefoot? Someone enjoying this too much?
Okay, so there's an actual answer to some of this, but you go first.
So what I will say is that, first of all, the persistent and eternal foot fetish memes did not exist yet at the time of most of these characters being designed. And it, from an IRL perspective, it ties back to a lot of like real world myths and such, where you would need to have actual, when you have like witches and wizards and stuff, they would often need to have physical connection with the earth. They would need to be touching the earth, pulling in power from the earth beneath them, as they would be touching it. And it has a very ethereal quality. If someone's wearing socks and shoes, they just look kind of normal.
Yeah, fair. Plus, in the Warhammer world, Jade magic is significantly increased when you're in direct contact with it, which is why almost all the Jade Wizard models were barefoot as well. And this is just a continuation of that trend, because the damsels et al. Are all using Jade in part of their magical combinations. So having them barefoot makes entire consistent sense within this particular part of the setting. So your Jade Wizards, your damsels, your Grail damsels et al. Will generally always be barefoot because they're using so much Jade magic.
Stephen Lucas, peasant conditions, meme versus cannons. Oh no, not the peasants. Boom. Anyway, so me and Andy have spoken about this a fair bit in the past, that Bretonnia suffers in particular from the notable issue that they only got a 6th edition book, and then they missed out on 7th and 8th edition. And if you go back and you read all of the 6th edition books, 6th edition is very, very grim, dark, poor, dirty, muddy fantasy. Like from the big.
It's a fucking awesome art.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful edition.
Book. Yeah, just great.
But it's like if you read like the 6th edition Empire book, it sucks just as much to be a poor regular person in the Empire as it does in Bretonnia. It has absolutely flavor, but it just sucks. Like the whole world sucks. And then 7th edition basically was like, okay, we're gonna mess around with things a little bit.
We're gonna brighten up a bit.
Yeah, and things became much brighter and more heroic and noble. And there were still those elements, but they were very pushed to the back. And 8th edition continued that trend, where 7th and 8th edition was almost more like a 7.5. But because Bretonnia didn't get that, they were just left in the background with this really grubby book, which made it seem like Bretonnia very uniquely was just like this horrible, shitty place where everywhere else was chill. And a lot of those other books, because Bretonnia was like a notable faction, despite the fact that they didn't get a book, they would be constantly punching down on Bretonnia to be like, look how cool our faction is, unlike those lame Bretonians over there. And instead of Bretonnia having a book to defend itself, it didn't. So it was just kind of this awkward situation where it's just constantly getting dirt kicked on it, and no one ever gave it.
And it already looked dirty when you looked in the 6th edition art. Yeah, completely. But if you want to see a brighter version, just go back to the 5th edition book, because the 5th edition book is a far brighter Hero Hammer version of Bretonnia, and it might be more what many people expect. However, as we dive into the roleplay game, they pretty much dialed up the peasant conditions, and they were like, yeah, it's bad. They're basically serfs. They are slaves under a different name. They don't have any freedom. They are absolutely controlled under all circumstances by the nobility. And many of the nobility are also corrupt, so it doesn't turn out particularly well for them. And that wasn't run away from by the author of that particular book. So it's both real. It's absolutely real. Conditions for peasants in Bretonnia are not great, but it's also a bit memed and taken a bit far in some places, particularly when you compare it to other parts of the old world where it isn't really much better. It's just other people have got perceptions that it is.
Yeah, and that's the big thing I would say, is that it does suck to be a Bretonnia and
it does.
Peasant in Bretonnia, but it also sucks to be like a regular laborer in a rural empire village or some beggar in one of the great cities. Life's hard in the Warhammer world. It's rough.
Yep. Agreed. 6th edition did a pretty fine job in general. Just worth noting.
Necromancer Cobalt, how is the Fay Enchantress rank in terms of surviving the being a woman written by mostly men tax in comparison to other female characters?
Not well. She doesn't do terribly, but she doesn't do well. She falls into many of the same tropes that are used for all of their female characters, in that she is the most beautiful woman in the world. Ha ha ha. But didn't you say that with shush, the most beautiful woman in the world? Alariel, bedamned. Morathy, who? Lucretia Belladonna, she is nobody. Emmanuel of House Leibowitz, who is that? Oh, wait a minute, that's all our female characters. They're all the most beautiful women in the world, and she suffers from that. But I'm going to argue that in this case, it's actually a worthwhile trope to suffer through, because it speaks to a different story that we're going to be discussing later. In terms of her overall character, though, she is not given the womanly nature that so many of the characters are given in her description, yet nonetheless, in many of her stories, something like this happens. Aha! So the Fay Enchantress is obviously someone we have to deal with. What we're going to do, I'll just send some dudes to hit her on the head. Bop! She's captured now! She's in a dungeon! What the fuck? She's the Fay Enchantress. How did this happen? What the? But again, that's when the character was first created, but that story never really got overwritten, so it's a thing that's happened to her. A bunch of dudes tried to jump her, she turned half of them into toads, the other half hit her in the head, and they threw her in a dungeon, and somehow she didn't get out until she was saved. There's lots of stories like that with her, because she's used like a female character, while simultaneously in other stories, she's leading armies, and she's throwing magic all over the place, and she is the core figure responsible for dynastic change and leadership in Bretonnia. So she suffers in some cases, but in other ways, she does really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a... there are very different takes about her, which there's kind of a funny, almost in-universe joke about whether or not it's the same Fay Enchantress and whether there have been multiples, and like, oh, well, maybe that was just a less powerful one. But I'm sure we'll get into that with Andy's intro.
I just want to bring up this from Jeff. You know what? I could probably do it with most of their female characters. I just picked the first ones that came to mind, and I was rather appalled that as I was going through them, I was like, oh shit, there's another one. Oh shit, there's another one. Oh shit, there's another one. Basically, if you're a female core character in Warhammer, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. Always funny.
Let's see. Donoman, off-topic question. Did Cormac attack the Empire before
Morcar?
The lore seems to suggest this. However, I've seen lore that says Cormac attacked in about 5 to 9 IC, but the Wolfram 4th edition timeline says Morcar attacked in 1 IC.
It does.
So, I will let Andy deal with that one, because...
So, the issue here is that the Morcar details are nonsense. And they're all over the place, and no one's ever pinned it down. So what really needs to be done is it needs to be properly tackled and written. And the answer would be, under most versions of it, that Morcar comes at the end of Sigmar's reign. It's the only thing that makes any sense when you take a look at the Sigmar stories that were done in the novels, because you find Morcar in there being a kid during Sigmar's reign, so it has to come near the end. Nevertheless, there are more than one source which says it doesn't, that Morcar attacked right after he became emperor in one place, which is definitely a thing. So the answer is, it just needs to be tidied up. And as we discussed in our previous stream, which I recommend you go watch, we did a stream yesterday about going over our old greats. We discussed that Morcar is one of those unique characters in Warhammer that perhaps could have his own very unique timeline, and how exactly that could manifest. And with that, all of these inconsistencies very quickly get ironed out and sort of work.
Nightantool, what I hope for Total War is a dark Bretonnia with Malobod the Black Serpent and non-vampiric corrupted Dark Knights. Would be cool.
Be a cool subfaction.
It would be a very cool subfaction.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple examples inside the Bretonnian army list of something like this occurring. Aha! Something bad rises in Bretonnia. And the lady withdraws her divine support in that area. Happened to Musalon, for example. And that area falls hard. The lady makes choices that completely change Bretonnia. She could have kept on supporting that area and throwing people in, but she's like, nope, they've gone against the core of what I think Bretonnia should be. I'm no longer supporting them until my true supporters get that shit sorted. So this sort of thing is, I think, not just a fun addition just because it matches the story of Bretonnia really well and reinforces it and speaks to sometimes the callousness of the lady and how she manifests within Bretonnia's politics.
Biofoot, but is she a fish man?
No.
Sadly not.
Sadly Biofoot, no.
Stephen Lucas, my first super chat. Some say the two are the same. Which two are we? I don't know.
I'm not sure which two you mean.
Yeah. Gary,
dang it. Clarify in the comments. I'll see if I spot it when it comes in.
Is there a particular chaos god that Bretonnia tends to wrangle with more than others? Examples being like elves and Slaanesh, Cathay and Tzeentch, etc. So this is a theme a lot of people wish the setting had, and it's not really a thing, to be bluntly honest. Is that like chaos is always there, and chaos is always trying to be a big threat, and like the dynamic between like, and if you want to force it, you can find it. Right,
yeah,
where
if you want
like
to force it, you'd say Tzeentch because change and shit. because the peasants want a better lot in life. Sure, I mean, you could argue that, but no, chaos is just an all-pervasive thing and corrupts Bretonnia equally or unequally, depending on the situation.
Yeah, Bretonia's had a pretty diverse set of chaos baddies, is the easiest way I would put it.
Just as a side, one of the best pieces of art with a Norse warlord. Fucking hell, that's great.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
in the 6th edition army list.
Yeah, Karn the Blighted versus the King, which the King loses that fight, which is spicy.
It's a fucking great piece of art too. It's great.
Yeah. So they've had all sorts of fun big bads. Donovan, so you're saying that the Lady Bellum situation is basically the Admiral Holdo and Paul Dameron situation from Star Wars Episode 8? No. That is not how I would.
Hey, Dinoman, can you clarify that? I think I missed something.
So he's asking if the situation where the Fay Enchantress basically, I don't know why he made it Lady Bellum situation, but fired the king.
It's Admiral Holdo and Paul Dameron. I'm not really getting that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say those are the same.
Not quite. I'm running through the film in my head trying to pull out a situation that matches it. It's not quite going. So yeah, I need a little bit more there regarding what the lady did with the
Joe the Ogre.
King.
Thank you for the
Thank you. Appreciate it, Joe. Awesome.
Necromancer Cobalt, if they were allowed to exist, how would y'all AOSify the Enchantress and the Lady beyond the Flesh Eater Courts? Well, so they're not the Flesh Eater Courts. But that was, to be fair, that was a joke that was very, very present and strong in the 1st and 2nd edition of Age of Sigmar, and then they basically got rid of that going into 3rd.
Just so we make sure we catch that.
Oh, they talk about the Enchantress is just the lady in mortal form. Yeah, okay. So there is, I will say, there is a very notable difference between the Enchantress and the lady, which is that when the lady appears, you know it's the lady. Like it is, you are dealing with a god. That although she is taking on the guise of a woman, it is still being in the presence of a god, especially a particularly powerful one. I mean, she could disguise herself. She could, if she really wanted to. But the idea that she is running around, participating casually in battles and such, and also got bonked on the head that one time and thrown in jail, is a bit hard to believe is also the same deity that's like manifesting out of lakes and letting people drink from the grail and stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Anyway, back to where we were. Sorry.
Yeah. How would I AOSify them? To put it very bluntly, I would probably lean really, really hard into the weirdest aspects of Arthurian legend, like going into a lot of legends from that time. So I would actually want to play around with the idea of like men that are empowered by like the blood of a god that they've drunk, but it comes with like a terrible cost. And that maybe there are many of them that are spiritual. So you have like a lot of, instead of like traditional Grail Knights, you have a lot of like somewhat broken ghost knights that have returned. So like, you know how you have the whole thing of like, oh, when we need Arthur most, him and all these people that have died will come back and save us, actually fulfilling that prophecy within Age of Sigmar, where you have like these legions of ghostly warriors that fought in the world that was, but they're kind of almost eternally damned to be ghostly knights that always are fighting against the forces of chaos, and they're kind of messed up. So you have like the tragic angle of they can never rest and they can never know
bearing
peace.
Every wound they ever suffered.
Yeah, but there are many of them that like do so with a form of nobility and like are willing to take on that weight because that is the chivalrous thing to do, and they've maintained that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But then you can have fun with like they have like big questing beasts, or you could have like the story of like how some people that have worshipped this deity through their own chivalrous actions have like befriended or tamed creatures like a Warhammer Tarask based on like the original Tarask myth. And all sorts of fun stuff. I'd go crazy with it.
Yeah.
Donovan, so you discussed how Bretonnia suffered from not having the 7th and 8th edition book. What are your thoughts on how the old world has updated Bretonnia? If you think they could have done more, what would you change about Bretonnia? So the whole noble knights versus mistreatment of peasant makes more sense. So
it's super easy for my answer. They didn't really update it. All they really did was say, you know what, there's female knights. Beyond that, they just reused all the art from 6th edition and deployed it again. And they copy-pasted most of the core descriptions from 6th edition and did that. They didn't really update it. So I don't think that I would say that the old world did what you would expect, which is to say, what would Bretonnia of 8th edition be 200 years earlier? It doesn't do that at all. It just says it's the same. Go.
Yeah, if anything, the most interesting thing they did so far is not actually in Bretonnia itself. It's in the Border Princedoms,
the Border Prince Quest.
Knights.
Yeah, the Exile Knights.
Yeah, revealing that, oh yeah, there are tons and tons of exiled knights. They are comfortable using guns in their armies. So like they're bringing back kind of like the old Bretonnia, where it's like, oh look, they've got guns and firearms and court wizards and all this stuff, which is cool. That's great. So that got more development, but like what's actually going on in the kingdoms and stuff, they were pretty scant on the details so far.
There's almost nothing there. So I would suggest at the moment that we don't know is the proper answer. All we know is what not quite Bretonians are like.
Niastra says, hello, how would you rate me and compare myself to all other women?
You are the most beautiful woman in the world, Niastra.
Yeah, you're my personal favorite.
You're a female character, you have to be.
Moonsong, Necromancer Cobalt. I actually like Morgiana going to the ghouls, breaking the delusion of some of them and helping them become real knights. That would be spicy. That would be an actually spicy take. That'd
be fun too.
Yeah, that could work really well. Ooh, man.
Yeah, makes for conflict. A really nice conflict core story. I like that, Moonsong.
Yeah, that could work really, really well. Donoman. Okay, follow up on Cormac. How the hell did he manage to get warriors from the Avogs and Waytun to help him and his army of 10,000?
Oh, it's tiny army of 10,000 at that as well, because 10,000 isn't actually that many. I would suggest something along the lines of, help! And someone said, oh shit, I'm shouting from help from miles away. Here, have yourself 50 warriors. And then you get yourself a small groups of war bands that are either exiles or basically something to calm the dude down who's shouting for the stuff, and they get themselves a big army of dudes from all the way across the north. But let's be honest, 10,000 is a small force when it comes to threatening anything of any size. In the greater scheme of Warhammer armies, 10,000 is tiny.
Yep, it just I will always be convinced that there have been too many nerd authors that are like 10. They like think of that scene from
$10,000.
10,000 orcs or Urukai, and they're like, "Oh, that's a big number. That was a big thing." It's like, no, it's not. Stephen Lucas, first cannon thugs with clubs versus baby seal. What? Realistically, the most grizzled wizard slayers decked in obsidian armor, but almost killed to a man. So talking about the Fay Enchantress getting captured.
Sure.
Yeah, so the story basically says that, if I recall correctly, the later stories that try and make sense of it are like, she was ambushed and they had like protections on them from what's her face, the sorceress.
Yeah, it's okay, her name will come to me. No, it won't. God damn it. I wish you hadn't said that. It was in my head from earlier.
I'll remember in a minute.
He trained in the College of the Magic as well, which I always find interesting.
Maldred's lady friend.
It's not Marathi Surveyor. Nice try.
Malfleer.
Is it Malfleur? That's it. Yeah, Fleur, not Fleur, as Mr. Mike put it. Marfleur. Yeah, thanks very much for that one, the bloke person, for spelling it right. Thanks. Appreciated. Bad flower.
So like she supposedly had given them protections, but it's still a lot. It's
a bit weak. Yeah.
I actually think they changed it in one story to she gets invited to a feast and they like drugged her. I think is when one of the stories goes down. Because she's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll come by and visit, and they're like, and they like they knock her out with some kind of thing that she eats. Zykaden, where do you think a Final Final Fantasy 14 dragon decided to live if one showed up? Bretonnia? Cathay? Deep in the mountains in the ruins of Sky Titans? Would depend. First of all, love me some Final Fantasy 14. Second of all, it could be any of those locations. It would depend a lot on which dragon. I think if you're dealing with more of like your Hraesvalgir, probably going to be deep in the mountain ruins, far away from everybody, because they generally kind of want to be left alone and are doing their own business. And the old world is an annoyingly busy place for many dragons. So I would bet some like big ancient ruins up in like the ancient giant lands and stuff like that would probably be a really appropriate place. All right, I think at this point we've got to go into intro because we're almost
I was going to do the intro at 45 past.
Okay, that works too.
Yeah, so 5 minutes when we finish off these ones. If we finish these ones first, though, we'll go dive into the intro because we have things to say.
Yeah, Donovan. So in episode 8, Admiral Holdo basically released Poe Dameron of his command after he acts too brashly and gets a bunch of bomber pilots killed at the start of the film. Sure, okay. And through that particular lens, you could argue that, sure, that could be what happened to the King Bellum the Brave. WPKM, been gone for a while. Hope you're both doing well. We are. Thank you so much. Jonathan Scott, more like Morgiana le Fay. Am I right? That's what that one wizard yelled before he got turned into a frog.
Morgiana le Fay. Ribbit. Ribbit.
Pancake awake. The lores of life, beasts, and heaven seem to be the main lores of magic for Bretonnia. Why not Hish? It seems to have themes of purity and protection, which seems to be themes come from Bretonnia. You're correct. You're correct,
because people always forget about the lore of light. I don't know why. It happens again and again and again and again. And game developers, when they're developing on the fantasy battle side, often don't seem to know what the lore of light is. So they just sort of miss including it. Meaning that there's lots of opportunities where it could have been added where they haven't, where this wind of purity, this wind of anti-demonic nonsense, this wind of divinity in many respects is often forgotten by those who are using what amounts to what appears to divine magic.
Let's see here. I'm thinking of with the Fae that the movie The Holiday with her as Cameron Diaz and Carl, Luther or Greases as Jude Law. Sure.
I mean, sure.
Darius is just working like on a full dating sim for the Warhammer world.
Yes, small mittens. I quite like The Holidays. Pretty good movie. Okay.
Diamond, to quote comedy band Fly the Conchords about major women in Warhammer, looking around the room, I could tell that you are the most beautiful girl in the room. And when I'm on the street, depending on the street, you'd definitely be in the top 3.
Top 1 for Warhammer, no matter how many there are in the room.
Yep. Let's see. Morgia Crescent, I don't know. I could see her willingly getting captured to inspire heroism in her knights, and also because she's not in any real danger. It's like, no.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be...
Mornington Crescent, I completely agree with that, but that's not how the story's pitched. I think, though, that there is a good story there that actually speaks to the truth, arguably, behind the lady anyway. So I think that... almost spot on.
Yep. Especially because, and we'll get to see how the old world is going to tackle that because it's going to happen in the old world. Lord Inquisitor, how wild is it in setting that Vermintide Kruber became a Grail Knight? Also, Uberstrike 5 stream. Carillion seems especially interesting. Love you guys. Thank you very much, Lord Inquisitor. So I would definitely love for us to do a stream on the Vermintide lore. I have to brush up on it. There is so much lore now for Vermintide because it's all through character dialogue and they say so much. They love to talk and they say so many things. So Grail Knight Kruber, is it a little silly? Yes, but it's also the end times and it is one of the less stupid things that happens in the end times. The idea the devs do in my opinion, very funny job of like doing it where it's like technically they're not wrong, and it opens a lot of curious questions, which is that Gruber he has Bretonnian blood flowing through his veins. He's the direct descendant of like a duke, and they're like, so he's out here doing all these great virtuous things and has basically been on the questing bow. And the lady's like, hey, I recognize you. You want to drink for the Grail? And he accepts and doesn't die. And I'm like, I mean, oh, yeah, I guess.
Right. Looking at the time, I think we're going to have to jump into our intro.
Just one more.
Let's do this first, though.
Have the ogres ever met the Fay Enchantress? Yes, they have.
There we go. Super easy. Alrighty. So where are we at time? We're there. So I'm going to move through a slightly quicker version than what I originally planned because you've been so chatty today, but we have quite a lot to cover, so I don't want to spend too much time diving into the history of where the Fay Enchantress comes from. But me being me, I'm definitely going to do a little bit. The Fay Enchantress originally popped into Warhammer in the 5th edition of the Fantasy Battle game. Now, this is a time of great controversy for Warhammer, one that if you weren't there at the time, you might not quite understand or realize. But it's one that was a controversy that was born of almost an argument as to what Bretonnia was within the studio more than it was within the common populace who would almost certainly be discussing it themselves. When the 5th edition of Bretonnia came out, when the 5th edition box set came out with their new Bretonnians even, they were different to what many people expected because they were shining knights, chivalric pillars of awesome that sounded more Arthurian and English than they did French or Bretonnian. Indeed, for all they were clearly inspired by the Grail romances, French inspired there, they felt super, super English, but with French names popped on top. Now, for anyone that followed Warhammer, this wasn't a great surprise, because let's be honest, the Empire is nothing more than England with German names. But that wasn't the case for Bretonnia before that, because there had been a write-up about Bretonnia in the 1st edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that had clearly pitched it as, almost 4 musketeers, because it would be Warhammer, you wouldn't get 3. 4 musketeers! Pre-revolutionary France. So where has that gone? At the very moment 5th edition came out, Man of War was still being sold in the Games Workshop stores. And in Man of War, you had an entire fleet of ships bedecked with cannons, the finest broadsides in the old world, the best cannoneers in the old world. And suddenly, they were not part of the setting. Now, you might go, well, there's not a lot of write-up there. We're talking about something that was in 1st edition, a couple of NPCs that came from this particular part, and Man of War, that's not much. Yeah, but you don't quite realize how lore is used if you think that, because lore is used in your games. In games of Warhammer, where you're playing fantasy battle games, lore doesn't matter that much unless you're building a story for why you're fighting. But if you're playing a roleplay game, it really matters. The world that you play in is being used again and again and again. So for all it might only be a page or 2 inside a rulebook, that will be 1,000 games across the country, adding 1,000 extra stories. So when the 5th edition came out and presented Bretonnia as Knights of the Realm, the shops went mad. Because all of the role players and those who had come before were up in arms about how Bretonnia had been turned into this nonsense realm that made no sense with all of the gunpowder realms around them. And even if you could pray to the lady and stop the gunpowder from hitting you, how does this make any sense at all? This is a nonsense. And the answer to that was, well, who wrote the Bretonnian army list? Nigel Stillman. Now, you might not know Nigel Stillman, but let's dial back to Warhammer 3rd edition. Because in Warhammer 3rd edition, we get ourselves a Bretonnian army, and guess what it is? Knights. Chivalric knights, known for their honor. Not musketeers. In fact, their army's mostly peasants and a really shit cannon, and I mean a shit one. It's mostly peasants. It's this realm of chivalric knights. So the 3rd edition became the 5th edition. And what Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay had tried to do with it in between and take it in a different direction failed completely. If you want to know what the true Bretonnia kind of always was, it's the one we got in 5th edition. It's not the pre-revolutionary France that many people out there go, this is what it should be. No, it isn't. It never was. Warhammer always had a different tale to be told. Fantasy Roleplay went in a different direction, and then it got overwritten again later. I'll get to that in just a moment, which is why we're discussing this now, so you can see where it all goes to. Now, in the 5th edition, we had these shining knights, and we had these great Grail knights who were basically the super soldiers of Warhammer. They were wandering around like Captain Bretonnia, doing their Captain Bretonnia thing with their big shield, except they didn't do it with a pistol, they did it with a sword. So Captain Bretonnia doing their thing, and instead of Captain Bretonnia doing it for, I only recognize one god, haha, and it's not you, Thor. No. They recognize one god, it's the Lady of the Lake. And the story of how the Bretonnians became tied to and wedded to the Lady of the Lake came hand in hand with a figure called Morgiana le Fay. Now, Morgiana le Fay is not, strictly speaking, the Fay Enchantress in Totalum. Let me explain that briefly before we move on. In the very first description of her, and the description we get in the 6th edition, and every other description of her, Morgiana le Fay is only her current name when we move into the end times. She has borne other names in the past, and many say that she is the same figure that came before. Others say she can't be because no one can live that long. Others say she's just taken on different faces and different names to appeal to each generation. There's lots of myth and strangeness around her because she is, and I quote, Le Fay. Le Fay. We'll get to what that means in just a second. So Morgiana le Fay is the representation of the goddess's will to everybody in Bretonnia. And she's pitched relatively simply in just a few points across the 5th edition army list as a character that is, in terms of power, sought out by everybody because her wisdom is without compare, and also pretty much put above everyone else in terms of her word in Bretonnia, because she speaks for the lady. She normally sits by herself, often an island in the middle of water, or off in a forest somewhere, doing her own thing, but occasionally when Bretonnia needs her, she comes. When the kingdom is in peril, she comes. And when someone seeks her out, she listens. She's a figure who's almost this distant sage, rather than necessarily the warrior queen. But she's also a traveller, because she wanders around Bretonnia doing one of the most controversial parts of Bretonnian lore. And that is, and I'm going to use the word steal, for all it's not the word that many people prefer, she steals children. Because everybody who has any magical capability inside Bretonnia is dragged up by Morgiana le Fay and her minions, and they are dragged off to the lady, where the girls are taught magic, and some of them return as the Grail damsels that are the wizards of, the priestesses of, if you will, the Bretonnians, and the men just never come out. They become almost the hand guard, the wizard knightly guard of the lady herself in another realm. We'll get to that in just a second. So we've got this character who picks all the kings, that the dukes and the kings are in awe of, that people are constantly going, she's freaking amazing and scary, one of the most powerful magic users, and get this, 4 pages of rules in her first setup. Most special characters during 5th edition, and what many people would call Hero Hammer, had a half page, a quarter page, or a full page if they were an important character. The full page was often the biggest, maybe a double page spread if you got yourself a piece of art, like the Green Knight, for example, who in this very same book got a lovely piece of art by Mark Gibbons, who is bluntly the best. Also did the Morgiana le Fay piece, also the best. Mm-hmm. She gets 4 pages dedicated to her, and rightly so. She has unique magic items, all manner of special rules for just including her. You put her in the army, and all of the various other champions come up to her and seek her blessing, and she can give them her blessing. But when she does that, she passes a part of herself over. So if they lose that blessing, she also loses a wound. So there's a double-handed part, a double-edged sword, if you will, to how this particular rule works. So that's 5th edition. We've got a really strong idea of a fairy tale kingdom. She is Le Fay. She's one of the Fay. A fairy tale kingdom with this female figure that represents their goddess that pretty much everyone listens to no matter what she says. She is a figure who either reincarnates, is immortal, somehow always comes back, but does bear different faces and different names down through the centuries. And Morgiana is her most recent name. We move into 6th edition, and they copy-paste this. They change the rules a bit. They mess around with it a little bit here and there. They tweak the story slightly, but ultimately the 6th edition takes everything 5th edition did and went, you know what? That was a little bit bright and colourful. Let's tone this all down, make everything black and white, grim and grubby, and ooh, we're going to go for some really nice, characterful, open medieval pieces for how the legends of Gilles Le Breton should be presented. But Morgiana le Fay is not really changed much in character at all. So across 2 editions, and we're talking from 1999 through to 2004. So in those 5 years, Morgiana doesn't really change much. 2 years later, we get our first real update. And this is when, rather famously, Knights of the Grail picks up where the Elven books beforehand have gone. Now, we've had a couple of stories here or there, some novels here or there, where they've all hinted at stuff. We're going to be getting onto those later. But Knights of the Grail is the one that I'm going to focus on in particular because it says something in black and white that had been hinted at up to this point. And it says it very clearly because it discusses the Fae directly. Now, the Fae have been discussed in multiple places already, and the Fae were clearly the elves, the wood elves of Athelloren. And Morgiana le Fay, Morgiana the elf, literally her name, was tackled. And in Knights of the Grail, they said the Fae are the elves. They are. That's just what they are. We've hinted at it in the army lists. We've said that we're charging into the forest to deal with the Fae. Okay, we're now stating it very clearly. They are the elves. And Morgiana le Fay is an elf. It's as simple as that. That is what she is. It's her actual name. She is Morgiana the Elf in her actual description. And she is not a reincarnating figure going through the centuries, how humans could possibly understand what is an elf dictating terms to a human kingdom. No, she's just an elf who's been around since the formation of Bretonnia 1,500 years earlier. And she's come in and out and in and out, and she wears the guise of a human and different faces and different names according to the need of the century at hand to best deploy the rule of the lady. She represents the lady who is a god. Now, many in that era interpreted this as, well, that means they're just wood elf patsies. The Bretonians are just wood elf slaves. They're just doing whatever the wood elves want. But we had very clear stories throughout the course of this era that the Wood Elves and the Bretonians were often killing each other. Often. Showing that the lady who was supporting these attacks was not supporting the Wood Elves in general, maybe specifically at points, but that means that the lady as a god and her primary emissary was not a wood elf as we understand it, but was definitely an elven god. No, I'm going to change that. As we've said in several previous Lorebeard episodes, they're not necessarily elven gods, they're just gods. And she has an elven subject who does what she wants, who is Morgiana. And that is loosely what we had as we dived into, eventually, some 10 years after that, the end times. And you always know I'm going to have fun when it hits the end times. But the end times went, you know, all of that stuff we've been hinting at about, ooh, she's an elf. And nah, she's just a human. In fact, no, she's just a human and she's been reincarnating and stuff. And yeah, all that lore gone. Morgiana le Fay, Morgiana the elf. What are you talking about? It's just Morgiana she's the Fay Enchantress. That's all it means.
I think you mean Morgiana the vampire.
Yeah. And then, oh no, she's a vampire. And that is where my intro hits yet another, oh, what did the end times do? Why did they do this point? But I think, given where I am at the time, I did intend to end on just about the hour. What I'm going to say here is what we have is a complex character that built up in a very short period of time. It was based on the original concepts for what Warhammer Bretonnia would be, which would be this realm of chivalric knights that they wanted to play around with and let everyone use knight models with, effectively. The roleplay game tried to go in a different direction, and it completely failed with its first edition to get enough traction, because when the 5th edition came along, it rewrote everything that the roleplay game did and Man of War did and brought it back to a chivalric realm. It then took this chivalric realm and it put bells and whistles on it. We know Morgiana le Fay is just Morgana le Fay underneath a different description, but they built a very different character, and they used the term Fay for something really very different. They used it very much for she's just an elf, the F-E-Y, the F-A-Y confusion. They make it very clear that all the Fay are elves, and it's written into the background more than once, until eventually we reach the end times and they unpick it all. So the question is, does that mean that the end times has rewritten everything in the past, meaning it's invalidated, or can we make it all work together? And as we say here in Lorebeards, the answer to that is generally always, hell yes, we can.
Oh yeah, we can make it work. Easy.
Yeah, damn straight.
So, we're gonna finish getting caught up on all the super chats that came in while Andy was doing his intro, and then we're gonna get into the weeds
because we got a lot of weeds to get through.
There are a lot of weeds to pull. So we were at boom. Giri Giriani-san. Oh my gosh. In AOS, we already have Bretons. The Order of the Fly from the Blighted Duchies with the Lady of Cankerwall and the Fly-Blown Chalice. Hail Nurgle! Yeah, their first edition AOS actually had like a competition, it felt like, where everyone was seeing where they could insert a fake Bretonnia with like Chaos had theirs with the Order of the Fly, which are extremely Bretonian. We had, though, Nurglified. Then we had, oh no, the Flesh Eater courts are actually the Bretonians because they have the great chalice of Ushoran that you drink from in order to gain incredible godly powers. And they see themselves as great chivalrous knights, and they're peasantries, and they used all the unit names for Bretonians back in first edition.
Yeah.
And they were dealing with like the great barbarians and savages. So you had the death version. So it was very silly. I am personally glad to see that all of these things have kind of fallen by the wayside. Like the Order of the Fly, if you read first edition AOS, the Order of the Fly is the big bad of Nurgle. Like the most active threatening force in all of the novels for first and a good part of second edition AOS is the Order of the Fly. The Order of the Fly has basically vanished off the face of the earth going into third edition. And they are never mentioned in fourth edition. So a lot of the haha fuck Bretonia stuff that AOS had early on almost all of it has been removed or is just not talked about anymore. Which coinciding with the return of the old world, I don't think is a coincidence. Czar94 just ran a 10K, and this is going to be a great recovery stream tomorrow where I could function again. Have a good one, gentlemen. I wish I could run a 10K. I say as I have probably the ability to do it, but refuse to because I hate running.
I could do it in 50-meter bursts.
I could walk it. Gary Gironison. For Age of Sigmar, the Lady in the Grail would be better for the Ideneth, Ladriel, the Misty God, human-souled elves, and redemption-seeking questing knights. It's certainly a way you could use it.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know if I would make it a purely Ideneth thing. I would say that there would be a group of the Ideneth that would instead be like an enclave that are kind of outcasts that have sided with Ladriel or were drawn to Ladriel. I definitely think there's a story you could do there. That I think she would make for the best. I think she would make for one of the best examples of a human elf hybridish faction. Because we do have some elves in like the Cities of Sigmar stuff, because we have like the old school dark elf models still running around. But I think this would work really, really well for that. Yeah. Michael Solomon, Firearm Marines and Lost Sons as new units in an army would be cool. I wouldn't have an issue with that. As long as the Marines are peasantry and they're not like, as long as they're not people that have taken the vows, then sure, great, problem, no problem there. Darius Rose, and then Aberash can be Jack Black, and Kate Winslet in The Holiday, the chick that cheated on him as Neferata. I am the god of cursed timelines. That
would be a cursed timeline, dude.
It would. I mean, I'd watch it. But
so would I.
Hey Walker, you've talked before about how elves don't often become priests, Hellborn aside. So the Fay Enchantress plus the lady seems super unique and unusual, dedicated for both thoughts. So it's not that elves don't often become priests.
And no, I'm going to contradict the concept here, because this is directly tackled inside, for example, Knights of the Grail, where it says quite bluntly they're not priests.
Oh, that's true too.
They're wizards. They're all wizards. Every single last one of them are wizards. There are no priests in Bretonnia as we understand them. And that would cause some significant consternation amongst those who are looking for an answer to where are the priests of the lady. The answer is there aren't any. Just none. They all manifest differently.
Yeah, that is expressly stated.
Yeah, in black and white as well. That's not even something where we are saying, oh, the lore suggests. That's exactly what it says. And David Chart was pretty much told to say that. That was the author of that particular book.
Moonsong, Morgiana putting herself at risk to give people on a quest the favors is amazing and endearing. Shows how much she believes in the Bretonnians. Yeah, and it actually lines up very strongly with what Bretonnia is dealing with at that point, which we're going to get into here in just a minute.
And it also lines up with one of my preferred views for Bretonnia concerning Ladriel as well. The idea of nothing so lost that it can't be found, and wearing masks and lying to get a very good outcome.
Biofun, but is she a fish man? No! He's drunk. Get him out of here. I'm not even going to try. French intimidates me. You want to try?
No, I'm not going to do it because I'll just sound stupid. So I'm quite happy with, l'état c'est l'enchantress. I have no, I'm even going to try.
Great.
But is there a Bretonnian middle class third estate? So this has been much discussed. The Bretonnian Revolution, what if, could be a great Wednesday stream. It could. There is a burgeoning middle class if we look at how it's presented inside Knights of the Grail for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. Whereas there's this class of traders and merchants who are working out the primary towns and cities, and they have their own merchant fleet, which lies outside of the honor laws, allowing them to have a Bretonnian fleet with cannons. And it's a merchant fleet, not the actual fleet of the knights, which would be effectively mobile platforms for knights, just delivering knights to their next big fight. They don't need cannons. They just sail straight up, hit the next ship, and jump in. Hey, I'm here to fight, orc style. So do they have one? Yes. Is it at the point where it could be a revolution? Absolutely not. It's really far away from that, largely because of the all-encompassing control of the lady. She has society from the top to the bottom wrapped up in everything that she states is the right way of living. And it really is almost all-consuming in terms of how the religion is expressed there. So it's not something that would work for a good. Could we make Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1's pre-revolutionary France work? The answer is, with how it sits, no, but I definitely could do it if given a bit of space and time to come up with something. I've said before that I think I could make both versions of the setting work and sound like they work together. And I think that it could also work really well with what came with the 3rd edition Fantasy Battle too, but it takes work.
Yeah, and I will note that if you're using just like the modernish lore and you're not wanting to deal with like the pre-revolutionary France stuff, this is what Malabad is. Malabad is the upcoming revolution, though he's doing it from a very different, more dark perspective, because he's I will win at any cost and committed to that.
Yeah, it feels really conservative, small c, almost big C, as in, those revolutionaries that stand against the state, who think there's a better way of life, they're evil bad guys. And it pitches it that way. Not my preference.
Yeah, because peasant uprisings don't go well. Those never go well. They're genuinely treated as jokes in most of the setting. Moonsong, her treatment in End Times felt like spite. Morgiana's place in the apocalypse is fighting chaos, defending / healing Bretonnians to the bitter end, and shining that last hope into the world goes dark. So I'll let you know a secret, which is that it's not a secret, which is that Bretonnia got shafted in the End Times because they weren't going to be an Age of Sigmar faction.
Yep.
So the goal was to throw them under the bus as hard as possible and get them out of the way.
And it's exactly what happened. And they didn't even give a nice conclusion for it, as in, and they fought valiantly doing X, Y, and Z. Oh, look how awful it is to see the dying of the light of Bretonnia. No, they just shafted it.
Yeah, and they also it once again it was the victim of, because they didn't have their own book, which meant that there would have been a perspective from which to defend them. Like Morgiana doesn't even make it to the End Times to be to be completely honest, she kind of gets like shafted in the Wood Elf 8th edition book as cannon fodder for Drycha, which was really weird and unnecessary. But and then like the whole thing with Manfred, that to me felt like they were
the Manfred story can go fuck off.
Yeah, it felt like they were torturing the character just to be like, haha, look how stupid Bretonnia is.
Yeah.
And it was weird. Like that was probably in my top 3 worst moments of the end times, was what they did to Morgiana le Fay.
Yep, agreed. Awful. But she's a woman, so it's okay, right?
Yeah. Stephen Lucas, devoid of end timesism, Fay was a vampire. Would be an interesting bait and switch instead of an elf. Maybe both if they had actually developed.
I don't think the story, as we understand vampires to be in Warhammer, would work, because vampires have a particular form of life, and that form of life is not at all compatible with what they were doing and what she does on a daily basis, the life she leads, the spell she uses, the way that she interacts, the goddess that she's constantly in touch with. All of it kind of is broken. The only way to make it work as a vampire would be to say she doesn't have the curses of the vampires as we understand today. She's effectively just an immortal human. And if that's the case, then why bother making her a vampire at all? Because we're now weakening the vampire trope by saying other things can be vampires in other ways. Look, your normal vampires are shit, because here's a good one. And we don't really want to try and say those other vampires are shit, because we've got a better example over here. So in many respects, I'd rather just tell a different story. Rather use the vampires to tell vampire stories, and I think that would probably work better.
I agree. To Andy's Musketeers comment, 5 Musketeers in Warhammer, because there's already 4 Musketeers.
Well,
and
yes, of course. And the Musketeers.
Yeah.
One for all and all for one. Muskehounds are always ready. I'm going into cartoons now. I'm going for the Muskehounds rather than the Musketeers.
I know. Good Lord. Moonsong. It's not being deprived of agency, written as a toy doll with no thoughts, used by some undeads and artificially tacked onto a subplot that has nothing to do with her.
That's not deprived of agency at all. Yeah, agreed with you, Moonsong.
Yeah, 100% agree. It was so frustrating. And you don't even really know about it unless you read like a short story that isn't part of the main story. If you read the main story, she literally is a blink and you'll miss it moment before Archon the Black slits her throat and kills her.
Yeah. Genuinely bullshit.
Yeah. Dumbo, maybe weird, but if the Lady and the Enchantress are so important, how come Bretonnia was written as almost hyper-sexist compared to, say, the Empire? Or am I wrong in how extreme this seemed in that regard? That's a great question.
Yeah.
So this is one of those cases. This is a weird but notable case where, to put it very bluntly, when Games Workshop was working on the Bretonnian Knights, they, for some reason, chose to lean heavy on real-world historical tropes.
Yep.
Which normally they didn't. But for some, and granted, Bretonnia has always been one of the more like, oh, look, it's like real world knights in a world of weird and monsters, even though there's a fucking like goddess that lets them drink her, what is probably her divine essence super soldiers, and she makes them into fucking Superman. But don't worry, we're the grounded faction. And you actually see this in the old Empire as well. A lot of people go, oh, the Empire wasn't super sexist. That's not true. If you go look at some of the older writings, the Empire would say stuff where women couldn't be in the military. Because girls can't be in the army. The Empire and Bretonnia used to genuinely suffer from, the writers were like, oh, well, these are real world factions, so they should have real world historical sexism, which doesn't make sense in the setting. And they figured out it didn't make sense, and the Empire got more books where they went, oh, that's stupid. Let's just let women show up on the battlefields. But Bretonnia never got those 7th and 8th edition books where they probably would have said, there's no real point in making knights male only, because we probably would have gotten a Reponse mini in 7th and 8th, which would have led to a whole thing. But it's an annoying situation of them allowing real world bias in history to bleed into a fictional fantasy setting.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot more that can be said in this one, but it'll turn into a stream all by itself, which would be Warhammer and sexism. because Warhammer and sexism go hand in hand, and to the most recent edition of Fantasy Roleplay was still an ongoing, prevalent discussion with the group of writers that are dealing with it, all of whom had their own opinions as to how best to express it. And when the game was released, the game got mauled by certain quarters for daring to show a female soldier. Mauled. No way of other putting it. I was delighted by how much some people were upset by that, because it was already by that point a core component of Warhammer, and I was not going to shy away from that. I was suggested to shy away from it by some parties who were like, don't do that because people will maul you, to which I was like, but it's the setting. I'm doing it. So it's something that's gone hand in hand with Warhammer for some time, but if you go back to the first edition writings, there's much less sexism than a lot of people think. But Bretonnia, when it was written by Nigel Stillman, was deeply, deeply sexist. And that was ported over into the second edition version of it for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and then was abolished as we move into the old world, where they go, actually, it makes zero sense with the world that we've built, because what difference does it make for a super soldier whether you're male or female? Literally nothing. So a woman who's as blessed is going to be as many times stronger as your average soldier as a man who's blessed. There's literally no point for there to be any sexism here other than we're writing it in for the sake of writing it in. This is daft. So they reorganized it and brought it back up to what probably they should have done first time round. But it was written in a previous era where that really wasn't a core concern, or indeed even a thought, in a studio where almost everyone was a man anyway. And no one was saying, I want to play too, or at least they weren't saying it loud enough to actually make an impact on the outcome. This was a problem and continues to be a problem. And for example, when even my local Games Workshop had a girls' games night, that caused a problem. It's a fun thing. We could have entire streams in this one.
Fun.
Yeah, fun.
I already did that one. Drago Knight, how cynical is the Fay Enchantress? Does she actually believe in chivalry, honor, purity, or is it just a tool to fight chaos? Mix of both? That's a cool question.
It's a really simple one. It's a really simple one. There is no need for cynicism at all. This is a classic looking from the outside in, attempting to justify it question. What the real answer is, when one is chivalric, honorable, and pure, you defy chaos. There's no cynicism in that. It's not been used to manipulate or control. It's been used because it works. It's a little bit like saying, how cynical is it to rub sticks together to make fire? What? That's just how you can make fire that way. This is one very powerful tool to fight chaos. It's not cynical. It's an effective use of not just tactics, but an effective way of protecting people and their souls. I don't think cynicism is quite the right angle to take with this one, Drago Knight.
No, I would say if you're looking at the Fay Enchantress from like negative quality aspects, I think there would be elements about her personality that if you were writing her from a human perspective would come off very much as like patronizing or terrifying.
So I'm not going to contradict myself. Is she, by the character as written, cynical? I would say absolutely to her core, while simultaneously believing it's the only way to protect the humans.
Yeah.
In that she will do and say whatever is required to save them. So you could argue that's cynical. But she thinks she's doing the right thing. And why is she doing that? Because it saves them all. It gives you the best weapon against chaos. It helps everybody. So cynicism is perhaps not quite the right word to take. But is she one of them? No. Will she do whatever she needs to do to get the result she wants? Absolutely, yes. And does that involve, for example, making peasants lose their children because it is the best outcome overall? Yes. She steals children. She steals children. She breaks families apart and then tells them that their God wants that to happen and they should be happy with it. It is a horrific outcome. Families torn asunder purely because, bluntly, it is the best way of dealing with chaos, because humans and magic don't go on at all well. It taints them. So you need to train them in a very careful, pure fashion outside of the reality of the actual Warhammer world. She takes them to a place called the Other World, which isn't the Warhammer world. It's in the Aether, separated completely, and they're all trained there where the kind of chaos can't reach them, because magic corrupts. And she is fully aware of that, so she ensures that there is no corruption that can be found within the populace of Bretonnia. Is it the right thing to do? From her perspective, absolutely. It's the only thing to do, because they will corrupt and create more of those crazy wizards who do crazy shit. A lot of the trouble that Bretonnia faces is often wizards from outside coming back and causing problems, like, for example, Malfleur, who was trained in the colleges of magic. Boom. Yeah, so, magic is bad, say. Yeah.
I'm gonna grab a couple more super chats and then we're gonna do some yapping.
Because we gotta do something at some point.
Yeah. Translation.
Thanks, Rexy.
Fate is the Enchantress. It is.
And I think that's fair.
Big Duke Johnson. Any thoughts on why the Dukes of Lyonesse, Carcassonne, and Artois would join with Malabad in the end times? Seems like a hard sell to support the guy with the massive undead army killing everything. So you are not wrong. And once again, the end times hand waves a lot of stuff and also pulls Bretonnia apart like a child torturing an animal. But if you were trying to make it work, one of the things that's notable about dukes is not all dukes, and throughout history, not necessarily even most dukes have drank from the Grail. Many of them are have completed like their basic errantry vow, and their Knight of the Realm vow, and that's probably it. Because a lot of the times they have to take over and rule their domain. They can't just up and leave to go do the quest, the Quest Ignite vow, because that would put a lot of things at risk, and it's not a requirement for their position, unlike being king, which requires you to be a Grail Knight. So the idea that some of the dukes who are just mortal men could be seduced or influenced by vampiric forces is completely plausible.
Possible. But I think Mr. Mike does indeed sum it up beautifully.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't. As written, they wouldn't. The lady is there. The Grail damsels are there. The Grail Knights are there. Their vows are there. They wouldn't, but they did. So in the end, we have to justify it. Exactly what occurred. And there's lots of ways we can justify it, but it doesn't tell a good story for Bretonnia at all, because it doesn't speak to what makes Bretonnia Bretonnia.
The ideal version would be that you actually fulfill Malabad's story to its conclusion, which would be that Malabad knows some deep, he thinks he knows some deep, dark, horrible truth about the lady, and he's able to convince others that what he believes is true. That leads to the Civil War. It, like the undead elements, Malabad getting Flanderized into this cackling evil vampire lord was heartbreakingly stupid.
I agree. And I also agree with the source of the entirety of that civil issue should have been the reality that the lady was, in fact, served by an elf, was almost certainly, from a certain point of view, serving elves at the detriment of humanity. That's not true at all, because Bretonnia as a realm stands pure and true because of everything that the lady had done. But one could certainly look at it, particularly if you look at what the fan base thought the lady was doing, and just go, that's awful. That's terrible. And there would be lots, and I do mean many in Bretonnia, who would be appalled, particularly those who had suffered the loss of their children. When they are told that it's all for the whims of an elf, they would be utterly up in arms. It's the Fae who have tricked them from the forest one more time. They can't allow this to happen. So, yeah, there's an awesomely cool story here. And I think that the story they landed on was a pale shadow of what it could have been.
Bloombull 972. I'll die on this hill. The word Fae should not be limited to wood elf, but should initially reference to spirit peace forms like naiads and dryads. Elves look like that, so they got mixed up with it. Would make sense without the lore and spirits close to naiads working for the lady, etc., and would add to the mystery of Morgiana.
I agree 100%. To the point that if we were updating Bretonnia, Morgiana le Fay almost certainly would have been not an elf. Morgiana le Fay would almost certainly have been a spirit. That's why she can reform.
That would have made so much more sense.
Okay, because she's le Fay. She's one of the Fae, so she's like the Dryads and the Naiads. She's got herself a form, and she can shapeshift like all of the various spirits can. So she can appear as human as and when she needs to, with her long flowing tresses that she cuts and she hands over to knights. And she's literally giving a part of her spiritual essence over when she does that, because she's a spirit, which means if those knights fall, she loses her wounds. It makes sense of her rules. So I don't just agree with you, I wholeheartedly support it. It's the direction that I fully intended to go in when we were at one point planning out a Bretonnia book.
Yeah. So I'm going to put a quick pause on Super Chats to actually talk a bit about good old Morgiana le Fay and some of the aspects about Bretonnia. So for those that don't know, the Fay Enchantress, the Fay Enchantress literally shows up with a bang into the actual timeline of the setting, which is that she is non-existent. No one's ever seen her before or anything until the fateful day when Gilles Le Breton is mortally wounded. For the second time, but this time it sticks.
It's a mortal wounding.
Yeah, as opposed to the first time he was mortally wounded, but then he healed and walked it off. So Gilles Le Breton is mortally wounded and he is dying, and he tells the companions to take him to this little lake that's very nearby, and they go over there, and as he's lying there dying, a mysterious mist rolls in from this lake, and I remember, was it the Lake Chalons or
Delis?
Delis. It was Lake Delis. Yeah. And a boat with a single woman on it comes riding out of the mist, and it is a mysterious woman who identifies herself as the Fay Enchantress. And she basically takes Gilles and gets him onto the boat, and the boat with Gilles on it, with no driver, magically goes back into the mist to take him to the other world, where he will be tended to by the lady and will return at an appointed hour and totally doesn't turn into the Green Knight. And the Fay Enchantress remains, and she remains to guide Bretonnia for the remainder of its days. Now, of course, the lore leaves it very vague about whether we always had, this is just Morgiana, and it's always been Morgiana, or whether it's been different figures. One of the things that was really interesting is that 6th edition leans so heavy on she's an elf, she's an elf, she's an elf, she's an elf, she's an elf.
Even the art. Look at the art.
Yeah, especially the art. Yeah. 5th edition uses the word human multiple times throughout her description. All of that gets scrubbed out in 6th. They never use the word human in 6th edition. And are like, oh, she's been around for maybe she's been around for thousands of years. Now, one of the things that's really cool is, so the Fay Enchantress has been around for a long time. In the grand scheme of things, not that long, but by Bretonnia standards, a long time. Being there from the founding of the nation.
From the founding, yeah.
She was the one that guided Gilles Le Breton's son on how to become king, establishing that system, explaining you must go on this great quest, you will find the Grail, and you will sup from it, and if you survive, then return and you shall be king. And he's like, okay, great. And good old little Louis runs off to go become king. And she has had notable moments where she pops up throughout history. She is not like, say, the Grand Theogenist, where she has like a political position and she shows up for appointments and she hangs out in her house and you could reliably get a hold of her. She does have a tower. There's the Tower of the Enchantress down near Carcassonne. And she also has, there's an island out in the Isle de Lis, where she originally supposedly came from, where she just hangs out sometimes.
Yeah. I'm just here. You want to come fight me? Away you come.
But she spends the significant majority of her time roaming around Bretonnia, because she's constantly, one of the things that's really interesting is she doesn't just show up when you have a magical baby. Instead, she shows up when any baby is born and tests them. Which is, it's not just
spooky.
her.
It's almost like she's a spirit.
Yeah, it's almost like she's a spirit. Yeah, and there's like, and just like she's a spirit, there are kind of almost games, really fucked up, messy games, where people try to do things to trick her sometimes to maybe take an infant that's not there. So like rich people will like pay a peasant family to switch their babies, or they'll, send their child away and try and make sure they escape before the Fay Enchantress arrives. But she always shows up when there's a new babe born. She she always knows. There are ways you could try and get the baby away from her or replace the baby with the human version of a changeling, which is kind of ironic. But she knows when a baby is born in Bretonnia, and she will come.
Yeah, pretty much.
And she, which is very unique if you actually know the setting, despite the fact these are babies, she can somehow detect if they are magical right then. Whereas like in the Empire, that is not an ability the colleges of magic have been demonstrated to have.
Or anything that they don't have. There's been individuals, like for example, there's a Bretonian amethyst wizard inside one of the campaigns for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay who has got the ability to detect what wind of magic you have and how strong you could be in that. But it's an individual with a certain capability. Where Morgiana le Fay has her child testing, which is presumably about as accurate as you can possibly get. And she can say, "Yep, here's a baby, time to whisk it away."
Yeah, which is a super eerie power that many nations would love to have access to, but also demonstrates an ability to detect magic that is unrivaled in the old world.
Pretty awesome.
The Fay Enchantress, though, some notable moments in her story as she kind of pops in and out of various sagas. If you read the Red Duke storyline, she plays a critical role in going up against the Red Duke. One of the things that's very interesting is that besides Morgiana, as far as I know, there has never been another named Fay Enchantress. If you read the Red Duke story, she's always referred to as the Fay Enchantress.
The Fay Enchantress, yeah. It's the case. When you see all the earlier tales of her, it's always the Fay Enchantress, and then whenever you've got a more recent tale, it's always Morgiana le Fay Enchantress, or just the Fay Enchantress. And they're pretty clear. I mean, there's a clear implication throughout all of it that for all they've said she uses other names, they're just talking about the same character. And they don't want to go around doing all the other names because it actually obscures her. It makes it more difficult to realize it's the same person. If you called her, I don't know, Bessie over there, and Bossy over here, and Annie over there, and then you went Morgiana over here, people would go, oh, there's like multiple characters, but they don't do that. They purposely avoid doing that. They say, there's Morgiana, who is the Fay Enchantress, and the Fay Enchantress has done all of these things. And lots of people believe that they're all the same person, even though she uses other names. Do they say the other names? No, because it doesn't help you as a reader understand who she is. And who is she? The same character in perpetuity. In perpetuity, pardon me.
Yeah, one of the things that I like that's a popular theory is that sometimes there are prophetesses or damsels that go out working on her authority that people mistake to be her, which has led to like this idea that she goes by different names. In that it's kind of that almost like how Cathay, there are all these different names for the emperor when it's really just like misunderstandings about various individuals that represent his authority as opposed to being him directly. But the main story that she is extremely famous for is during what we now know as the Old World. Though there's some little fun anecdotes, we'll talk about her in a bit. But during the Old World, to put into context, Bretonnia is in a really, really bad place. Where Bretonnia has survived a couple of notable bad things, like the Red Pox, where the Skaven tried to take over Bretonnia and they almost did. The
lady abandons them.
Yeah, but the Wood Elves thankfully showed up and helped them. And all these terrible things have been happening. And we are basically in the modern era, which is like 2276, where we have King Louis King Lewin Orcslayer, and he is going to die. And when he dies, there is a bit of a crisis because he doesn't have an heir. Normally, this isn't a problem because the Fay Enchantress will simply show up, declare an heir, but there is a rot at the heart of Bretonnia that a lot of people have not noticed yet, which is most heavily represented by a guy named Duke Maudred. And Maudred is the Duke of Mousillon.
Of course he is.
And he is beloved. He is seen as a fantastic Duke. A lot of people like him. Many think that he is finally alleviating the curse of Mousillon, which has had a bit of a rough history for several hundred years, ever since a different duke who turned out to be a vampire of the worst kind. And Maldred has a consort, a sorceress named Malflair. Now, it's not unusual.
Who was trained in the colleges of magic. They don't exist yet, but she's trained in the colleges of magic.
She just popped to the future real fast, came back after her education, as you do.
But this is a common error. For example, you'll find in Warhammer 7th, I think it's 7th edition, there's a beautiful one-page piece of art, talking about a great device that's being taken through the streets of Altdorf, created by the Colleges of Magic. But the device is a good 300 years before the Colleges of Magic were even formed. Warhammer does this a lot.
Yeah, people think the colleges have been there since like the beginning.
They forget that they were created after the Great War against Chaos. Yeah, that they weren't created until like 2306-ish.
Yeah, so so Malflair herself wasn't like a huge red alert. A lot of the various dukes and nobles and lords of Bretonnia have court wizards that are not damsels. A lot, which is not liked by the Fay Enchantress, but it is allowed. Which is really interesting. Like, she permits it. She doesn't like go to war with these wizards. Now, if they are particularly spicy, there was a notably famous event where a wizard got in a spat with her during a great jousting tournament hosted by the king, and her and this wizard get into a magical duel that results in this powerful wizard getting turned into a frog.
Yeah, it's classic. Morgiana le Fay always turns someone else into a frog. It's what she does. It's also worth noting that if we go to the 5th edition version of Bretonnia, the idea of a court wizard is core. The wizards of Bretonnia are all trained in the Empire, all of them. The damsels and the Grail damsels et al. Aren't perceived as wizards. They're like the prophetesses. They're the seeresses. They're the figures that represent. In many respects, they're similar to priests of Sigmar in the Empire. They fulfill a different role, but they are also really powerful spellcasters, as it turns out. But the concept of a court wizard is not held by the damsels. It's not their job. They've got different jobs to do. So the wizardly aspect in that edition was handled by the Wizards of the Empire. Now, that brought up questions at the time when that came out, which was, why don't I have wizards in my army list? And the answer was, because that's what the Empire has, and you're playing a Bretonnian army, you dick. So they kind of got rid of that later, because they didn't want to have people asking that ridiculous question, which was, why don't I have an Amethyst wizard in my Bretonnian Empire? And the answer was, we're just not going to mention court wizards in this edition. And it never got upgraded later. But the idea of a court wizard inside Bretonnia is almost standard in most versions of the text.
Yeah. So Duke Maldred, thanks to his sorceress consort, likely he knows the king's getting on an age. And also there's a big war happening and things are getting very, very messy. And he prepares for the death of the king. And what he does is, depending on which version of the story you read, he either invites the Fay Enchantress to come visit him, or they lay an ambush for her. But either way, somehow, some way, the Fay Enchantress is captured, which is surprising. But once again, I would heavily... Well, let me finish the story, and then we'll swing back to that. She is taken alive, and she is imprisoned in a little island off the coast of Musion, where she is imprisoned in the Dungeon of Dole.
Dungeon of Dole, yeah.
And she is guarded by some big, horrific chaos beastie that is never explicitly named, but it's this big, horrible
obviously monster. We've got one of those hanging around. Perfect.
Yeah. And the Dungeon of Dole is said to have been specifically constructed to contain the Fay Enchantress. It is a special, like, DC/Marvel supervillain prison meant to basically cancel out magic and keep her contained.
It's really funny because in the first version of this story, they don't say any of that, and you can almost hear the, oh shit, we didn't write enough, did we? Everyone's going, how the fuck could this work? I read her stats. She's fucking rock hard. She's got 4 pages of special rules. How does this work? It works because we poisoned her. Yeah, didn't we mention that? And also, we put her in mega jail.
Yeah. Though, interestingly, it's revealed later that her magic still works in the jail. Like, there is life magic still sprouted and, like, growing into the jail. But, she totally couldn't have left No,
not in the slightest.
But she remains there and she waits while Bretonnia goes through this whole thing where basically Duke Maldred goes, yes, my consort is actually the Lady of the Lake and she has given me the Grail. I have it. And Bretonnia basically finds itself on the cusp of civil war because a lot of people fall for this. Because it's a very convincing sorceress illusion, and the Fay Enchantress doesn't show up to like say that he's wrong. So they're like, "Oh damn!" And
must be real.
Yeah, and then there's this guy named Gaston de Guéry, I think. And Gaston basically goes, "I don't know about that," and he runs away. He's off doing his questing Val stuff, and he
be aware that nobody fights like Gaston.
Yeah, nobody fights like Gaston. And Gaston basically hears something calling him. The land itself is compelling him in a certain direction. And he follows it, and he ends up getting to the coast where he sees this strange, mysterious dungeon over on this island. He goes, I need to get over there. And he and his horse get on over there, and he climbs up this great stone thing where there's this big stone bridge, and he goes, I shall cross this bridge, because he sees a woman in distress up at the tower waiting for him, like she knew he was going to be there.
The urge to say what dress?
Yeah.
This dress. Sorry, carry on.
And as he goes across the bridge, big horrible chaos beastie comes out. They have a big epic fight, and I believe the Fay Enchantress actually helps him in a very subtle way. Like I think she throws him like a trough or
he doesn't need any help because no one fights like Gaston.
Yeah. Anyway, he kills the beastie. The bridge collapses and the beastie goes down with it and dies. And he goes in there and says, "Damsel, I'm here to save you." And he walks in and he goes, "Oh my god, holy shit, it's the Fay Enchantress." And she goes, "Gaston, you did it. You passed the test. Good job." And he gets his Grail thing, I think right at this point or right after this point. Don't worry about it. And she with him, they leave. They go back to the mainland where a bunch of Grail Knights are called by the Fay Enchantress, and they show up forming a cool little bodyguard. And she rides over to where this big, huge battle is about to break out between the like loyalists of Duke Maldred and the people who think Duke Maldred is full of shit. And the Fay Enchantress shows up, and just as the battle is about to start, she very dramatically shows up with like a big crack of thunder. It goes, "False!" And reveals the false Grail, which is now, this is the affair of the false Grail, which this whole affair takes like a good 10. It takes a few years. But she reveals the sham for what it is. There's a big fight. Malflayer gets completely overwhelmed. Like, Malflayer is played as this like incredibly powerful, almost unstoppable, like demonic dark sorceress with illusion and death powers and all this stuff. And the Lady of the Lake, or the Fay Enchantress, mops the fucking floor with her. And they have to run. So Duke Maldred and Malflayer flee back to Mousillon, where the siege of Mousillon begins. And the two of them hide in their castle, where they die mysteriously to a sudden return of the Red Pox, which totally isn't because Maldred had allied with the Skaven and their alliance fell apart. No, of course not. But the interesting thing about the Fay Enchantress during this whole story is that every time she performs any kind of feat, or you have moments where you get a look at her, she does not at all come off as a, "Oh, look at me, woe is me, I'm imprisoned, I'm in chains, I'm wounded." Nope, she's in perfect health the entire time.
Yep, agreed.
She's unstoppable when she chooses to be. She simply waits for Bretonnia to save itself.
So I would recommend you go check our stream on Ladriel, because the very nature of what that character suggests is her character. Now, for those of you who haven't checked that, very simply, Ladriel is the goddess of mists of the elves, and she is one of the guises, definitely. There's no way getting around that. It's stayed in black and white of the lady, the elven god. There's other guys, which I find an amusing next step, which is in the end times. We've discussed more than once before in the past, and I'm not going to deign to mention it again. We're just going to stick with the Ladriel part. The goddess of mists, lies, and shadows, and helping those who are on lost paths, who are seeking something that they can't find. Basically, Ladriel is the god of the Bretonnians. And the character that Morgiana shows is exactly Ladriel's character, which is constantly lying about who she is and what she can do to get the outcomes that she's looking for, to help those who are lost find their true path. The very core of what Ladriel is also the core of what Morgiana does as she goes about her steps, hopefully helping Bretonnia get back up on its feet from the terrible position it's found itself in.
Yeah, Morgiana is also incredibly powerful. One of is a lot of people don't realize how fucking scary she is. Of that, she is so magically charged. Canonically, she is so charged with magic that she can literally just look at someone, and if you make eye contact with her, you die.
Or if you go with the earlier lore, you turn into a frog.
Equally terrible.
Exactly the same rule is used for both of them. So on one side, they say, this is how she turns you into a frog. And in the later one, because there was no frog miniatures or any equivalent, they went, nah, fuck it, you just lose wounds. Because that's better than just losing your character instantly. Because she was super overpowered in 5th edition. So 6th edition dialed it back a little bit and just said, actually, you just lose a wound instead.
Yeah, she's also an incredible alchemist. The Chalice of Potions, it got a little simplified in 6th edition to make its rules not such a mess, because 5th edition has so many rules.
So many rules. It's like half a page of rules just for one magic item. Now, the chalice is cool. There's a big chalice so that it can do different potions as she splashes them down on the ground. But having to go through all those rules and make a choice each time you used it was a pain in the arse, because you had to go through it all and decide which one you want, which means sometimes at the table, someone would go, wait a minute. No, I've not even finished the first one yet. Which one are you using? I don't know, because I've not read them all. And they sit there and they're back to it again. It's a fucking pain in the arse. The rewrite for 6th edition was a good one, but the core concept is she's got potions that can really, really, really boost up or fuck with the day for her allies and enemies that come out of her chalice of potions. And she does it all using lilies.
Yeah, it's literally says she just picks up lilies from the battlefield and mixes them together, and it's terrifying. Like, the 5th edition actually described how it works, where there's situations where she just has this chalice, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna run up and kill this lady, and she sees you coming, and she just dumps it onto the ground, and a purple fog comes up, and all of the enemies around her just choke to death. Like they lose the ability to breathe and just collapse dead on the ground. But 6th edition did do some funny stuff where she is quite literally able to see, and this is represented in Total War, where she takes the chalice and she dumps it and it hits the ground and a fog comes up, and then a fucking comet from the sky falls down and kills you.
Love it.
Like, she wields magic and alchemical processes so casually that it is insane.
Yeah, alchemy is probably not the best word to use. It's more like she's using potions. She's, herbs and herbalism and that sort of idea rather than alchemy per se. But it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, she also is very much always surrounded by mist. Her mist is incredibly powerful. She wields the mist of the lady like almost like a living force. 5th edition was much more heavily explored. 6th edition is a little more casual in the background, but Total War brings it back to the forefront, where there is a living mist around her that she can use to obscure massive parts of the battlefield, make enemy units get lost. Like, imagine a mist so thick you can't see where you're going, so you're not willing to run because you might trip over and just die on something, so you're moving very hesitantly through this thing. So she's confusing enemy forces, making using any ranged weapons completely unfeasible because you can't see what the fuck you're supposed to be aiming at. And she's also very, very, very hard to hurt. Her defenses are nuts.
Yeah, magic item, Girdle of Gold, for example, which is effectively a ward save. For those of you who know your terms, it gives her a fixed save that can't be modified by anything whenever she takes wounds. So it's a constant, if you want to use 40k terms, like she's got a force field around her at all times, which is handy.
There is a fun thing I like about the Fay Enchantress, though, that is very unique, which is that she shares a common thread with like the likes of Alariel and Ariel, where it is always talked about that she's basically wielding like the power of the land of Bretonnia against you. But unlike Alariel, who wields the power of like the earth and Ulthuan, and Ariel, who wields the power of Athel Loren, they are seasonal. And when their lands start getting like heavily corrupt or like damaged or chaos is invading, their power heavily declines. The Fay Enchantress does not get weaker. She does not become this like she does not be like, oh, I have to fall back because I can't deal with this threat. What she does is she says, I must step back because Bretonnia must deal with this threat. Like during the age of Rapunz de Leoness, when Karn the Blighted and his big plague feet invades Bretonnia and they kill the king, the Fay Enchantress is not captured. She is not defeated in some great battle. She waits for Rapunz, for someone to step up to the role of being the defender of Bretonnia, to allow a knight to step into the role of leading the charge and gaining incredible power and taking on and killing an unstoppable Nurgle Lord. And Rapunz did it without the fucking Grail too. Rapunz isn't a Grail Knight. She was just a lady. But
I particularly like how her magic is described in various parts, because where the other ones are often tied directly through to, as Sotek says, seasons and similar, hers are instead tied to the sacred places to the Lady of the Lake. So we're talking all the various lakes, for example, that are spread throughout Bretonnia, all of which are covered with fleur-de-lis, with lilies. And these lilies are used... yeah, a little bit.
Basically, hitting Bretonnia with surprise quizzes.
These lilies, the roots of these lilies, are used in all of her magic, and they spiral around her hands, her body, and lilies are everywhere with everything that she does. And her magic is literally drawing up from the land itself, suggesting that the goddess that she's drawing from, or the power that lies beneath, doesn't really care what sort of corruption may or may not be in the land, because it's hers, and she is there. And they are her holy lands, and she just unleashes regardless of what's going on. She doesn't have that moment that you get with almost every other one of these, let's call them elven-style wizards, where they weaken under many circumstances. She doesn't.
Yeah, also, for those curious, when it comes to, like, power level, she was a beast in 6th edition. Like, she had a +6 bonus to cast life magic. That is insane. Most wizards, like the best wizards in the game, were +5.
Yeah. Yeah, she's good. In the old version as well, she also had a magic mirror. That didn't come into the 6th, but it was in the 5th. And the way that worked was in 5th edition, in the magic set, there was a card called Magical Duel, Mental Duel. And with a Mental Duel, you effectively went, you wizard over there, let's have a Mental Duel, and you fucked them up. And so she got a better option of fucking up other wizards using her mirror, which meant that she was better at doing it. And she also had the all-important power familiar in the form of a toad.
Yeah, which is hilarious because that is like a sapient human being that got turned into a frog that she uses as a battery.
Gotta love it. What I particularly liked about the versions between 5th and 6th had one other major difference as well. In 5th edition, she made her best showing if she was in a unit of Knights Errant, because Knights Errant gained most benefits from her various blessings and powers that she had. Where in the 6th edition of the game, she comes with her own unit of Grail Knights. Okay, so basically you get yourself an additional unit of Grail Knights, when normally you can only ever have one inside your army. If you've got her along, you've now got 2 to 8 Grail Knights to sit alongside her, kick ass, chew gum, and generally make everybody's life worse. But I would actually argue that using the rules of 5th edition and their lance formation and popping them against arguably some of the weaker knights, the Knights Errant, the powers that she added to them made that unit horrendous because all the way back then in 5th edition, 75% of your characters in the Bretonnian army could be your total points. Sorry, one way around. 75% of your points could be characters, which meant the vast majority of your points in your Bretonnian army were in characters. So you just surrounded her with characters, all of whom gain benefits because of the potions that she dropped, because of the favors that she dropped around her. Everyone around her turns into a combat wombat that can take everything down from giant demons to vampires to anything, because she's got an individual potion for dealing with pretty much all of them. And it just sucked to go against her. I have been on the battlefield against Morgiana more than once. Every single time it was kill her fast at range, not in combat, or ignore that entire unit. But one of the problems with the Bretonnian army is that they often only had one unit.
So
because all their points and all their characters were sitting in that one bloody unit with a couple of little peasant archers at the back going, I had to take these just to make up the points because I have to have at least 25% points in unit. So I've got a couple of archers. So they're pinging at the back being arses, and that's your only chance to get any real points, because taking out that unit with Morgiana in it, and obviously a Bretonnian Grail Knight or 5, is actually almost impossible. And that's exactly what she's like in terms of her lore description as well. Any who come around her gain her favor, her blessing. The lady works through her. She uses lilies in a fashion that not only empowers her potions, but empowers her spells. She's drawing upon the magic of the land in a fashion that makes others go, what the hell am I up against? And the answer is, you're up against the emissary of a god, which means you better be ready. Now, her base stats aren't that great, but they don't need to be that great, because what she can do is immense.
Yeah, she brings out the best in men.
Yeah, she does. She brings out the best in all around them.
Men being human, not like boys.
And again, noting earlier as well, it's worth noting that those who take her favor, which used to be best with errant knights, and then if you're an experienced knight, you gain less of a benefit from it. But those who took her favor, if they fell, she took extra wounds, which was one way of trying to take her out. I tried. I often failed. It's worth a go. She also made the Knight's Blessing better. Now, we're talking 5th edition. It was used to basically hold off against all the various cannon fire and all the rest. But come 6th edition, it just turned into a ward save for everybody, where they get themselves like a 5+ ward save against everything because she's in the army, which fucking sucks. Hey, comes a cannon. 5+ save. Here's 5+ save. Slash maim. 5+ save.
Greater demon. 5 up. Don't care.
Yeah. Oh, the number of times I swore at the battlefield when that stupid character came out. It's like, you play with Morgiana, fuck you. And because 75% of your characters, apparently your points could be characters in the Bretonnian army, she could easily fit into just a 1,000 point army, where normally taking a spellcaster and a wizard in an army that size is almost impossible. Nope, you could do that with Morgiana. You get her in a 1,000 point army and it sucked. So yeah, she's pretty damn good is what we're trying to say.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna get caught up on some super chat stuff, and then we'll hop back into it in a second.
Yeah, let's power through these.
Moonsong, Morgiana isn't just duty. Her whole life is caring after Bretonnia. It makes sense that she has come to see her place as a nurturer, protectress of its people, a sense of belonging and purpose.
Yeah, and purpose, I think, is an important component of that. It is her life's purpose. And her purpose is not the feelings of her people, which is arguably to her detriment come the end times, because if her people were all inside, the story we were pitching to try and fix the end times would have been far harder to land. But she is a figure of terror to many, for all she is almost certainly perfect and pure in all of her intentions. And she's a figure of terror because she's a child napper. Let's not dance around that. She steals children, and some don't want their children taken and will do anything in their power to ensure that she doesn't.
Yeah, well, and especially the Fay Enchantress, despite the fact that she's not like this big crazy warrior or anything, she has a baseline fear rule to everyone. She causes terror against like Skaven and
Beastmen and Skaven and shit.
Yeah. But everyone is afraid of her because she just has this aura of otherworldliness. But like in the Fay Enchantress and the Lady both represent these very powerful etheric forces that they're so strong that anything that is a truly material creature like a human witnessing them, it is profoundly uncomfortable because there's a part of your brain screaming, this is wrong. There's something wrong here.
She's a spirit. I mean, if we look at what her rules represent and suggest, she makes a better spirit than she does a vampire. She makes a better spirit than she does an elf. She makes a better spirit than she does a manifestation purely of a god. She is following all of the rules you would expect for a spirit. She's a powerful force of magic, and she terrifies those that she's up against, and she has little standard human morality. In that the human concerns that many have, she sees straight past, and she will absolutely put herself in the worst position possible and cause others to go through hell and possibly die to prove that they are worthy of the grail that comes at the end of their quest. And that doesn't... You need to be a psychopath to do that sort of shit. I mean, she has zero care at all for the horrors that they go through beyond the fact it forges them into something better. If you want to sum this up, Ladriel's modus operandi is to inflict horror to get the strongest outcome. And it's not nice.
No.
At all.
Skylar, if I did miss a super chat,
we?
I looked. I didn't see it, but I did look through them. But if there was a question you had, just repeat it in the chat. You don't have to super chat again. Just drop it in the chat and we'll grab it.
Yeah, totally. I'm watching now.
Rexy, that always makes me laugh that everyone calls Bretonnia the French, when in reality, the only things inspired by medieval France are the first names, last names, cities, and Rapunzel Lyonesse. Yep. Welcome to Warhammer.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we even get ourselves, and watch next week for more on this, we even get ourselves Robin Hood. So he's notably French.
Yeah, very famous.
I mean, hell, if you go with one of the movies, he's pretty American, if you ask me.
Poor Misia. Greetings. Sorry for being late. Never need to be apologize for being late. And I will not be able to stay for a long time since tomorrow is Monday, and unfortunately, I need money. Don't we fucking all hang in there and survive the grind. We believe in you. Let's see. We have. Oh, actually, this is a really good comment. I just want to grab. Dylan says, I understand she's a psychopath, but also with the power she can give, I understand it now. Yes. The power that she is going to give to humans cannot be given. You have to be put through hell so that she knows you could be trusted. There has never been an evil Grail Knight.
They've earned it. Yeah, they've earned it. And they're the sort that when Morgiana le Fay comes to them later and say, hey, dude, you have to step down, they say, yes. And that's the Royarch, the king of Bretonnia, just goes, yeah, sure. Okay, if that's what you think's right. Because they have proven themselves and character-wise are the type of people who would do that.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say all Grey Knights are perfect. There have been some that are vaguely cruel, and there are some that are... from a human perspective, are not nice people, but they've never fallen to chaos.
Yeah. I mean, many of them are written in a rather nasty way sometimes.
Yeah.
But yes.
90 Coyote, first ever super chat. Well, welcome. And thank you so much. You. Greetings from Lincoln, England.
Greetings. Hello.
Sorry for being off topic. No need. No, you don't need to apologize. But have you guys had a chance to read the new Cathay Journal Meow Ying's Expedition? Yes, I have. Yes. It's great. It's awesome. We're going to be doing an episode in the near future where we're going to be catching up on the timeline of the old world. We're just going to wait for the War of Cetrus Fury to come out because we might as well do the whole thing.
Do the whole thing at once.
But I was very, very pleased with that book. I had,
although I do still want to just say, Yang Yang.
Yeah.
Yang Yang.
At least Yin Yin shows up several times and they talk about her. The fact I cannot for the life of me figure out if Games Workshop is intentionally making her as big of a girl failure as she is, but it's so fucking funny. And I really hope it's intentional because it would make her such a beloved character. If her siblings are just like, God damn it, Yin Yin, like just almost every opportunity, it would make me so happy. Yeah. Parmesia, do you think Albrecht could be used by Games Workshop for Bretonnia in the future for the old world as a servant of Manon in order for Bretonnia to be expanded upon? Can Albrecht himself be used? No, because he hasn't been born yet. Could they expand on the Mannonites? I guess would be the right term. In Bretonnia, from like the naval ports and like how their relationship is like slightly different with the lady compared to others. Yeah, sure, that'd be fun. Bretonnia, one of the things I was actually really... I know a lot of people don't like Albrecht, but I do. And the big thing is that it unintentionally did a great job of showcasing that while the lady is the preeminent deity in Bretonnia, she's not the only one. And many of them pay very close attention and pay proper respects to gods as they're relevant and such. With Albrecht de Bordelot wielding a trident dedicated to Manon and being an extreme, like, Manon is like, if the lady is here for Bordelot, Manon is like almost touching her. He's right there, which is cool. And I would love to see, I'll put it this way, if they released like the second edition of the Old World, if we got Priests of Manon as a unit for Bretonnia, I would be thrilled, because that would be so different than anything we've ever had for Bretonnia.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorcerer Friend is someone whose top two favorite factions are Bretonnia and the Beastmen. I'm very used to disappointment, but this is a pleasant surprise. If there were other elves working to aid Bretonnia for Ladriel, what would you have them do? They exist. They are called Wood Elves. Some of them are more sympathetic to Bretonnia than others. Which is
the lack of development for Ladriel there makes it harder. But I would genuinely probably say I wouldn't. I don't think I would like to add more elves to this particular mix, because I don't think it makes for a better story. In many respects, it weakens the Bretonnian story. The lady is Bretonnia's god, regardless of what the elves may or may not like, may or may not think of that. So yeah, I don't think I would add more elves.
Yeah, because what I would say, one of the core things that Bretonnia never answers, and it's a shame it never answers it in the end, because the end time should have answered it, but it doesn't. Should have been an exploration for why did Ladriel choose to go with a nation of humans and not the elves?
Yeah, because I think there's a good question there.
Many of the elves love her deeply, and she does help them. You know, she helps them fairly. You know, there are various sects of like, you have like the Shadow Warriors and the Mistwalkers of Ulthuan are very, very pro-Ladriel. You have various groups within Athel Loren that are very pro-Ladriel. You have Dark Elves that are pro-Ladriel. But it's not to them that she shares incredible godly gifts. It's to humanity.
Yeah. And to their benefit as well, massively to their benefit. It suggests lots of potential stories ranging from the elves are not capable of receiving those gifts, to humans are more mutable, so thus can do more with them, to Ladriel would prefer not to use elves for what is potentially a horrific war. There's lots of different angles you could take, but I think an angle should be taken. And I think that's the bit that's missing. There's not a lovely piece of story there explaining why that route was taken over the others, and why a goddess that is clearly deeply manipulative, deeply controlling, wished to do it this way rather than a different way, given the very nature of the world in which she inhabits and what's beside it. And we've discussed this loosely with some of our Wood Elf streams earlier, that she may have had a motivation that was somehow tied to what had happened in Athel Loren or similar, and the human tribes are the best way of achieving this. But this is supposition. We don't have a clean answer.
Provincia, speaking of Manon, what is the relationship between Morgiana and Manon? Do they like/tolerate each other or no? So they don't, to be very blunt, there's nothing that's written. She doesn't ever go out to sea, as far as we know. She always stays in Bretonnia and is always dealing with Bretonnia stuff. And
not quite true. She's occasionally cited as being outside Bretonnia when questing nights are off doing some unlikely, unexpected quests outside Bretonnia. So there's sightings, but that's about it.
True. And I would be willing to bet that she did not get to those places on a boat.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay. She has quite literally another realm that she can go into. So she can just pop into the water, go into the aether, into the other world, where the lady holds court, along with all of her human servants and elven servants and spirits and more. And we even have a short story involving parts of that place.
Genuinely
and then can
horrifying
pop out,
spirits.
It is. And can pop out anywhere that's sacred to the Lady of the Lake. So she can quite literally be found with Grail. The lady can be found, that is, by any place where there's water and lilies in the world. anywhere. It's almost like she's connected to some version of the world roots or something like that.
Yeah. Ultimately, though, I would not expect there to be any really relationship between Morgiana and Manon, other than maybe like when she shows up in coastal cities, like the cult of Manon receives her, and there's maybe some dialogue, but like I don't think she really cares about Manon that much because he's off in the ocean doing ocean shit.
Yeah, totally.
Watchdog 3079, can you give us a small rundown of her ability/items? I think we did that.
We did that. Yep, we have.
So
thanks, Watchdog, for highlighting it, because we might not have done it by this point. Let's be honest.
Still loading. Hello. Why have a king when Morgiana exists?
Because you need someone to lead everyone. Morgiana doesn't.
Yeah. She's busy. She has to be places. A king's job is to rule, to lead, and I think there is a inherent wisdom in making sure that it is a human that is leading this nation of humans and not some otherworldly creature sitting up there as an immortal ruler.
She's a human. I don't know what you're saying. I've read the end times. She's a human.
Sorcerer friend, like the idea of the Fay Enchantress being an actual Fay. Gonna change her to that in my campaign's version of Bretonnia. Great stream as always, gentlemen. Here's money. Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I think that, and I'm really glad that was brought by Soros. I think that is the most natural fit for what we have. The fit that most people expect is an elf, because that's largely where 6th edition went, and it's what the 2nd edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay also went with, while simultaneously saying the elves are the Fae, that's what they are. But when you look at the books, the Fae are more complicated than that, because many of what people think are elves are in fact dryads. They hear a bunch of chattering women dancing in a forest and they go, it's the elves or it's the Fae, where in fact they're just dryads who are not in the war form that we all recognize from the miniatures, which are big barky willowy lashing horrors. They're almost like demons, dare I even say it, demons of the forest. Perish the thought. But actual Fae is the most obvious fit.
Singemeister, who's winning the chivalrous French jerk tournament between Bretonnia or
Toussaint? Not Bretonnia, probably Orlais.
I'll trust his judgment.
Okay, so that's Dragon Age, Witcher, and Warhammer.
Ryan von Aegir, was there ever sources to the idea that the lady made Bretonnia to protect the Wood Elves? I've seen it stated as fact, but I never found sources for it.
Kinda. Yeah, kinda.
Yeah. Okay. This is actually an interesting question, because from the Wood Elf perspective, the Wood Elves say Bretonnia only exists to be their shield. That is never stated from the Bretonnian perspective or from the lady's perspective. Even in the end times, Bretonnia, it's very stupid, but they the lady basically says something along the lines of that she elevated Bretonnia so that they would be better than they were. And she also makes Grail Knights so she can take their souls to make them into like immortal guardians for like a new universe. Which
new universe. It's a whole thing.
Like sure,
like the last universe from which she had come.
Yeah. Which she was clearly insane. Like she was just fucking insane at this point.
She was Ladriel. She was lying.
Yeah, yes, that is the actual truth.
She was just pulling the wool over their eyes.
So this is a situation where the Wood Elf army books explicitly say that the Wood Elves, according to the Wood Elves, Bretonnia only exists to be their shield. But that is just the Wood Elf perspective, and the Wood Elves are dicks, so who cares what they think?
So I broadly agree with this, and by that I mean that the Wood Elf book makes it relatively clear. The roleplay side suggests that it's just elves, isn't it? And it implies rather than states that the entire faith of Bretonnia has been established as a Wood Elf scheme, where when you look at it all much more carefully, it's much more complicated, particularly when you see, for example, Orion and Ariel moving against the lady, which is something that happens in the end times as well. This is something that occurs at more than one point during history, where the lady and her worshippers are on the receiving end of Wood Elf ire, because they are not on the same side. Regardless of what the lady may be to Orion and Ariel, who almost certainly have a stronger idea of what the hell's going over there than most, but doesn't necessarily mean they know what's going on. regardless of what they say, they do believe that Bretonnia and everything that's there has been fostered by themselves to provide a great buffer against the greenskin invasions, against the beastmen. And they have carefully tended it like a garden patch. And that means sometimes they come in with their pruning shears and they snip. They wild hunt their way through areas that they think are problematic and likely to cause problems or potentially rise up against them. The Wood Elves are tending the Bretonians from their perspective, but that does not mean at all that the lady is their scheme.
Yeah, and I would say very much the thing that simply proves it in my mind is if this was true, the lady would never help Bretonians against the Wood Elves, and she always does.
Yep. Always.
Like she likes to foster an alliance between the two, but if the Wood Elves, like when wild hunts come down, she helps the Bretonians fight them back. Now, the Wood Elf books always paint it where that the Bretonians just always, every single time, get their absolute shit rocked. But that's
not
kind
true.
of Wood Elf propaganda, to put it
It really
bluntly.
is. It's not true. There's several wars where they're getting their ass handed to them. So, yeah, it's more complicated than that alone.
Watchdog 3079, off topic. What is the worst place to be a rat catcher?
Skaven Blight.
Do they have rat catchers in Skaven Blight?
Well, imagine you were one there. That'd be the worst place to be one.
Yeah, I would say probably somewhere close.
Hellpit.
Yeah, probably the
Fester
nearest
Spike.
city to Hellpit would probably be pretty rough.
Under Altdor.
Oftentimes
I'm done. That's my answers.
Yeah, oftentimes Middenheim is usually pitched as the worst because there's so much other stuff down there, and you can get lost, and it's bad. Because the Faustschlag sucks. It just sucks. It's a terrible
It really
place.
does. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Stephen Lucas, she used the escape card and went to the past. Fix.
There you go. Malfleur sorted. That'll do it.
Yep.
Like that one, Stephen.
But is she a fish man? Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Cole Patterson, what would a Bretonian Merlin be like if you made one?
I wouldn't. I'd make it an Albion Merlin.
That's a good answer.
Okay, because we don't want to disrupt our... We've got Morgiana le Fay. Okay, and she's not fulfilling the same role as Morgana le Fay is in the Grail romances. She's fulfilled a different role. In many respects, she's fulfilling a role closer to Merlin's. So it would be effectively a reproduction that would be weakening Morgiana. So I wouldn't like to do that. I'd much rather do something different, which means let's look around for the obvious fix. And it's obviously Albion, to the point that I was already half building that for a campaign I was once writing.
Yeah, and that would actually work so much better in my opinion, because then you could still have that classic, like, intense rivalry between the Morgana and Merlin figures, but it being the Fay Enchantress and this extremely powerful uber druid from Albion.
Yeah,
then you have like the Mist of the Lady versus the Mist of Albion. Like, there'd be a lot of really cool parallels between the two of them.
Yeah, totally. Different sources. We're dealing with somebody who almost certainly is a druid in the truest sense of the form, and is related to the hedge witches, is not related to, say, for example, the lady and their faith. It is an antagonistic force that's more closely related to the old ones than it is related to Ladriel.
Yep. Morton Crescent, Monty Python and the Grail. I'm the Fay Enchantress. There are those who call me Vamp.
Yeah, not wrong.
Ricky Chapman, we told you yesterday that in our Wolford Chaos campaign, our Chaos Lord's adopted son was killed by the Enchantress. He had managed to kill a Grail Knight. He was then turned into a toad and stepped on by Morgiana's unicorn.
Oh, we forgot to mention that she's got a unicorn. She's got a unicorn.
Yeah,
and it's a pretty damn fine unicorn. Pardon?
Civil Roll.
Yeah, indeed. It's a fine unicorn. Got its own little save. Holds off against magic. If it charges, it gets to use its big, huge, pointy head as a lance. So +2 strength and charges. Yeah, pretty decent.
Now, there is something unique about Silveron, which is her unicorn. He is noted to be different because unlike most unicorns that dwell in places like Athel Loren or like the magical forest of Bretonnia and such, which is where damsels and such usually contact them, he is explicitly stated to reside within the otherworld. And comes when Morgiana calls him.
Which means, again, we're just going to say it quite bluntly, it's a spirit.
Yeah, which actually,
event fits very well with her being the same.
Yeah. Yep. Pormisia, also sorry for your buddy's adopted son. Pormisia, if Morgiana is one of the most powerful sorcerers, where would you put her among the best wizards of the old world? For example, better than Marathi?
No.
No.
She's a top tier spellcaster. She's really, really, really good. But if she goes against the top graduates of the colleges of magic, she's going to struggle at points. If she goes against Marathi's probably going to win. She's not someone who is marked down as being the perfect example of a particular school of magic. From a god that is known for magic. What she is a shadowy, misty figure that strikes from the shadows and uses situations to her own benefit because she's more cunning. I would argue that she's more cunning than many, but when it comes to pure power, Marathi is pure power when it comes to magic. She would almost certainly completely outpower her, but not necessarily outwit her.
Yeah, the Fay Enchantress is less so. When you're thinking about wizards, there's a lot of different kinds and specialists. Yeah, Marathi's power is over 9,000.
Over 9,000.
But the Fay Enchantress
impossible.
Where Marathi is almost more like a nuclear bomb. Like it's all this really powerful, aggressive force. The Fay Enchantress is almost much more of a support wizard. Her magic heavily specializes in taking the humans around her and raising them up to insane levels of power.
And I'm going to quickly just grab a couple of these just so we do. So, to be blunt, she's stronger than Teclis or not? No, she's not. Teclis is level 5. She's level 4. She's very good at what she does, though. If we move over to more cunning than Marathi. Cunning, yes. Marathi is very cunning, but she is more known for her exceptional skill in magic, her foresight, being a seer. And because she's a seer, she often appears cunning because she sees everything that's coming. She is literally cunning as a manifestation of Ladriel's divine will. Ladriel, the god of cunning in many respects. Yeah, the Fay Enchantress has got it on her.
Also, might be a little hard if you're someone that relies on prophecy and seeing the future against someone that is the best at obfuscating myths and being hidden from view.
Again, see LAWhammer.
Yeah, and the Fay Enchantress is one of those characters that her power is also highly dependent on kind of where she is. If she is like in a sacred place of Bretonnia, like if you come at her and she's at the Lake Degi where she came out of, she's probably going to wipe the floor with you.
It's the time when a Marathi goes, I don't want to deal with that, backs off and waits for her to come to her.
Yeah.
And then Marathi spanks her.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil 5991, are the Azrai aware of the fact that an elf goddess is moonlighting as the Lady of the Lake? If they do, then do they feel slighted that one of their gods is giving their favor to an inferior species?
They are gods. It's an interesting concept.
So the Wood Elves perspective is written as they think there's something a little weird about the Lady of the Lake, and there's something vaguely familiar about her, but they can't put their finger on it, which likely has to do with the fact that Ladriel specializes in being hidden and obfuscation, and her divine power is literally being hard to identify and recognize. So they can't figure out she's Ladriel because she's fucking Ladriel.
Yeah. It's really complicated. There's lots of theories and a lot of it's confused, and that's the way it should be, because we're dealing with Ladriel, the mother of mists, the indistinct mistwalker, the one who cannot be perceived even when everyone's looking directly at her. Then it makes sense that they don't quite get it. And I just want to bring this one up one more time. Stronger than Teclis? No. Weaker than Marathi? Yes. More cunning than both? Yes.
Teclis you're not going to read the last part? You fucked up twink. You weren't going to read that part?
Didn't need to.
So one of the things I'll say is, and this, for me, this is one of the big reasons, one of the biggest pieces of evidence, in my opinion, why she's not Lalaeth, and she has never been Lalaeth, is that Ariel is a literal mortal incarnation of Isha, and Lalaeth is Isha's fucking daughter. Isha knows Lalaeth.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know the lady.
Yeah. Now, Ladriel as a goddess could do this. And what they do in the end times, they conflate Ladriel with Lalaeth. And they say, Lalaeth was always Ladriel. And you're like, wait a minute, what? Wait a minute. The husband... Wait a minute. Yeah, just give a moment here, right? Wait a minute. Azurin is what, Lilith's wife now, who is sometimes said to be her father or even grandfather in one story. What the fuck's going on here? It doesn't actually make any sense according to all the myths we have. It's one of those examples of end times writing where someone's just going, and this is what I'm going to do. Have you read up what that means? Nope, I'm just doing this because I think it's a great story. And they went with it. And the story, when you see it combined with everything else that's been written about them, just doesn't make sense. No sense at all. But there is a story that does make sense when you look at it all, and that's that the lady, who is Ladriel, definitely, who is, if we go with the end times, Lilith, probably. If we do all that, it's just Ladriel lying about Lilith. Because she's got her own schemes to put in place. She has an outcome that she's looking for. And when you do that, all of the stories before that make sense. It makes sense for Ladriel's character, who always wears someone else's face. It's what she does. She never shows her true form. The lady is one of the many faces that she wears. It makes sense for her to, when she's speaking to the elves, wear the face of Lilith and come in dreams. Makes absolute sense. It's what Ladriel would do. Lie. So the whole end times completely makes sense if you do that, because you can take all of the stuff that Lilith does and go, yeah, this is just all bullshit that's being spun to get a particular end. And suddenly the whole story sort of makes sense. All it needs then, if you're writing it again, is a conclusion where not necessarily the truth comes out, but what the plan of Ladriel, what's effectively attempting to put in place, comes out. And then you're like, oh.
Yeah. But I mean, according to her in the end time, she's also an alien. So
yeah, bullshit from another dimension.
Yep. Phil, I've heard that the lady only cares about the knights rather than the common folk of Bretonnia. I've also heard peasants are not allowed to worship the lady. Do you think this makes sense? Okay, so
no,
no, that doesn't make sense. And it's easy to prove of that. The peasantry do not receive martial blessings from the lady. But they are blessed by the lady in their own fashions, in that she protects them from forms of corruption. She protects them with bounty. Oh, so look at Bretonnia like this. Imagine if you don't care about humans in like an emotional level, but there is a goal you need to achieve, and you create a machine, and the machine's job is to create the best and most powerful forces that can be used against the forces of corruption possible. So you design a system of that. You're going to have a warrior class that breeds the most powerful men and women that it possibly can. And in order to feed, supply, and ensure that these warriors can focus on being the best warriors they possibly can be, you create another caste whose job is to supply them with the resources and support they need to become the best they can. Therefore, they exist to protect that other caste, so that it's a functioning system. It's callous, it's cruel, but it works.
Yeah, it's a classic elf design.
It's not that she doesn't care about the peasants. It's that they're doing their job, and their job isn't to fight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a system built on equality. It's not a system built on equality at all. It is a system built on functionality. Everybody has their place, and they have to push and prove themselves at all times within that. And to answer Lady Worship directly, the Lady is one of the gods of Warhammer that is worshipped, properly worshipped. Unlike the way that many view the term worship for many of the gods in the Warhammer world, where it's not an appropriate term, where the gods are instead feared, or they are given offerings because of the horrors that they might bring or the advantages they might bring, but they're not worshipped in the way that we understand worship in the real world. But the Lady absolutely is, much like Sigmar, worshipped in a way that most other gods just aren't. And that worship extends to the peasantry. The Lady is a core component of Bretonnian society at all levels. This is tackled in more than one source. The very first time that she's introduced, indeed, there's an entire section about the peasants and the Lady and what they mean to each other. And the Lady is directly tied into all aspects of peasant life. You want to go check that out? Go check out the 5th edition of the Bretonnian Army List. You'll find like a full page worth of material discussing the Lady and her relationship with peasants.
Yeah, I think it's I want to say it's Knights of the Grail that did this weird thing where they were like, oh, peasants aren't allowed to worship the Lady of the
That was
Lake.
Knights of the Grail, and it was also called out at the time behind the scenes. Knights of the Grail, it's actually worth noting in general. Knights of the Grail was one of the earliest books for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. And the development of it, at the end of it, when it was going through its appraisals, there was a lot of behind the scene talk of, fuck, we did this wrong, and we should have done it differently. I was brought in from being just someone who did some advice at that point to actually doing the writing, because they were so disappointed with how certain aspects of this book and Carrick Asgul in particular, it was those two books and where they landed. It wasn't to say that the writers didn't do a good job, they did. It's just they didn't know enough about certain subjects, and they needed to have somebody to come in and provide a deeper edit to make sure that it all matched perfectly. And how the other gods were treated inside that was deemed to be not necessarily the best reflection of the material that had already been written up to that point, and they really were hoping that it could be done better later. So
but in all of the core canon army books, the peasants absolutely worship the lady.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. Meaning the Knights of the Grail went contrary to that, which is one of the reasons why there was a big hoo-ha at Games Workshop, and they realized that the fantasy roleplay game was going in a different direction to the books that it was based on.
Yeah, and also while the lady in the battle game, she only gives like her protection and shit to the knights. In the actual like nitty gritty of the story, there are times where the lady comes to the aid of people that are peasants that pray to her, where she will give them strength of arms in a rare moment, or the strength of heart in a rare moment. Rapunzel de Leoness was a fucking shepherdess before, in a moment of bravery, she heard the lady calling to her, followed the call to an abandoned Grail chapel, where she, under the lady's inspiration, kind of ransacks this big sword and the banner from that tomb and runs off to go fight with the full lady's blessing behind her. She does bless her people. It's just the battle game has balance stuff it has to deal with, but hopefully that makes sense. Ricky Tapman, our Chaos Lord avenged the death of his son by burning half of the country, and with 4 damsels we caught, force-fed them warpstone and tied them to anchors and threw them into several sacred lakes.
Holy shit.
All right. It's a little fucked up, but okay.
Fucking hell.
Jesus. Moonsong. So it's about putting people on a path of growth no matter the cost, like a tough mother who intervenes directly only when she's really needed.
Actually, there is Moonsong. I think there's a good analogy to draw there about parenting, where Morgiana and the lady as a whole is almost their paternal units, or parental units would be better, for Bretonnia, in that they are often saying no, they are often telling them off, they're often then giving them object lessons that to the child can seem deeply unfair. But from the greater position of helping them grow into hopefully a measured adult that will be able to handle the world, absolutely necessary. And this is something most parents go through, a period of their child's life where they have to constantly say no, or you can't do it that way, or this is how you do it instead. Or sometimes some of the better parents will literally say, how do you think this is tackled? Let them realize what they're doing wrong and then come to the conclusions at the end how to do it right. And in many respects, it's exactly what Morgiana is doing when she gets herself captured, thrown in a tower, and shows the route through to freeing her so that they can get on to the next steps. It's a different scale, and it's arguably much more callous, but they are also adults who are free thinking and capable of doing different choices, and they very much chose to pursue the hard route towards trying to free her. So yes, there is definitely a parental aspect to how they think of and offer control over Bretonnia.
Yep. Nye 10 Tool. I could swear I read about a failed Bretonnian crusade in the Darklands at one point, but I can't find any mention about it online. Was I imagining stuff, or did it really take place? It probably took place. But
this is really annoying me because I can't remember it, but it's also tickling at the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Now.
So Bretonnia, the closest thing I could think of is, to me, that sounds like the Bretonnians when they were going through. They had an errantry crusade that was declared where they swept through the border princes and they kept going further east until they ran into Morglum Neck Snapper, which was like in the World's Edge Mountain Darkland ballpark, and they get this big fight. It's the errantry war to wipe greenskins off the face of the earth, which but the Morglum Neck Snapper beats them. That's where he does his infinite his infamous quote where he says, "Go back and tell your king that the east is green." That's probably that one.
Yeah, it's probably that one. I'm trying to remember his name. I've got a feeling his name was Orcslayer or something stupid like that.
No, it's not King Lewin Orcslayer because that's our current one.
Yeah, okay. Who the heck was it? Never mind. Doesn't matter. We'll move on to that later.
Yeah. But like, if you want the true thing, like, remember Warhammer allows you to like put armies anywhere. So like, if you were to go to GW and ask, has there been a Bretonnian crusade to X? They would go, yeah, sure. So a crusade that made it to the Darklands and then failed seems extremely likely. Federico Velasquez. What about the knightly orders inside Bretonnia? Do we have any dedicated to Manon?
Yeah,
how would they? How would they be expanded? There are actual knightly orders. They're not talked about very much, but they do exist.
Yeah. There's famously up in one Menandsheim up in the north of Nordland. There's another couple over in Marienburg. Yeah, there's quite a few knightly orders that are entirely dedicated to Menan. They often carry tridents.
Yeah, but are there any knightly orders inside Bretonnia? Is this question?
None. Oh, sorry, in Bretonnia, I missed that little part. We have none that we know of?
Yeah,
and we don't actually know of any knightly orders really in Bretonnia that aren't part of the established system of the Knights of the Realm.
Yeah, honestly, which you figure, I don't think they would be knightly orders as we understand from the Empire, but you figure there would be groups that emulate like the Companions, where there's organizations of knights that focus on particular things, but Bretonnia has never gotten that level of introspection on how the knights organize themselves. Because it is weird. Yeah. It's weird that they don't have some form of personal organization that's more of like a club or a fraternity.
I mean, they exist in all manner of places historically, but when we're looking at the historical era at the time, you tend to find most of the orders of that ilk came sort of after that period. So I can sort of see why no one's ever bothered doing it. Yeah, I'll just bring up this one. Foreigners, yes. Knights Panther trade in the Empire. Yeah, Knights Panther do go down through Bretonnia. They're known for being in Longueuil, for example. Knights of the Blazing Sun chapter house is somewhat similarly. Their chapter house would be doing the same thing. So would there be knights of other peoples inside the cities? Yes, but we're talking about Bretonians specifically. And is it possible that some Bretonians may have joined them? Unlikely. Really unlikely, given how they have a religious prerogative not to do so.
Yeah, it would probably be deeply, deeply frowned upon. Singemeister, besides, we already have Warhammer Merlin, Warzag.
Okay, sure.
I mean, yeah, why not? Phil 5991. Is the lake from when the lady first appeared to Gilles a holy site? Yes. Does it have a name? Yes.
Yes.
Is it the Lake de Chalons?
That's the Lake Delise.
No, Delise is where the Fay Enchantress takes him.
No, you're right.
That wasn't the first.
The lady first appeared.
I think that was the lake. I think that was the lake in
that might be Chalon. Yeah, that's Chalon. Yeah, Chalon. Yeah.
I think it is explicitly mentioned. But
this is enough that I'm actually going to go look it up to make sure I'm not wrong.
Cool.
Because it's annoying me.
5991. Yes, we have answered that one. Thank you, Phil, and also thank you for all the cheers, Phil. Really appreciate it. Gary Geronison. What influence had elf culture mentality on Bretonnia? Okay, so. So influence is an interesting word because influence is more than just cultural contact, which comes from, say, for example, shared information or shared cultural touching points. It could be, for example, being invaded and what those invasions have done to the culture of Bretonnia because of this. And also that is definitely something that happens frequently in the east of Bretonnia. Yeah, and also that almost all of the Bretonnian castles are built on elven ruins. Yeah. And a lot of the early Brittany tribes were heavily influenced by elven architecture, elven writings, elven runes, elven beliefs as they were constantly interacting with these things.
Our version of Bretonnia that we have now is founded approximately 1,000 years after the Empire. So our Bretonnian tribes that are wandering around in that area for about 1,000 years worth of cultural osmosis to pick up from not just the elves, but also the foundation of the Empire over on the other side, which at various points invades across the Grey Mountains and holds areas of what will become Bretonnia later as part of the Empire. So Their language is almost certainly strongly influenced by the Empire, but they also have invasions coming from the south, from Estalia, which had been an established area long before Bretonia's founding, all of which are also culturally influenced by the elves. I think it's just a very big, complicated web based on the ruins that they've inhabited, the occasional cultural and actual merchant trades that they've made in places like Longueuil. The High Elves have a strong relationship with some of the Bretonian coastal cities.
Yeah, especially with
and
the old world adding all the new High Elf islands.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of cultural exchange there. Similar exchange over with the Wood Elves, where it's far more fey and dangerous and strange, and they're an enemy. But that still changes the cultures of the areas that are beside them, as their cultures have to become more warlike and more defensive. But I think there's a clean point to make as well that Sotek referenced as well, just concerning their architecture. It looks more elven than it looks standard human as we understand it. Standard human, as we understand it, is much more classical from the south, or alternatively Germanic style from the Empire in the north, where the Bretonian architecture is far more tall, fluted towers, round rather than square, with square being the standard for high elven towers. But we look at a lot of the wood elven towers, many of them are also completely rounded too. So there's a lot of it, while simultaneously most of it appears to be somewhat light in comparison to direct influences, like, for example, in the Empire, where it was absolutely changed by the influence of the Wood Elves at various points. High Elves, pardon me, at various points. Not as much as the Dwarves, though.
Thanks. Seeing Morgiana as a sort of mother, carefully steering Bretonians towards becoming better versions of themselves, feels very natural.
It does. And I think it's super easy for those that really want to hate elves to look at this and go, fuck those guys and what they're doing to manipulate the Bretonians. And this is a common theme for many who look at the story and take it at face value and ignore parts of the story that came in the end times later. And they just take the elven story and say, let's have a look at that. Fuck these guys. What are they doing to the Bretonians? Where in truth, as truthful as I can be, the lady has made Bretonia a far less chaos-infected location that's far more prepared for the worst that the world has to offer, and is capable, even though it is technologically backward, of facing against anything that the world pitches at it. It's not a system that's filled with great equality. It is not a society that with modern eyes we look at and go, that looks great. It's not that at all, because that's not what they're trying to make it be. They're trying to make it be something that will survive arguably the end times. It is kind of hilarious that it's the faction that got it worst up the ass when the end times actually came.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's the one that on paper is arguably in the best place.
I want to pull this up because this is an interesting comment. Blind Lobster said, it's funny how King Arthur's Morgan Le Fay is almost the complete opposite of Morgiana le Fay of Bretonnia, Morgan being bad, self-centered, sexual, and petty. I wouldn't necessarily fully agree with this. I think there are perspectives or people that would deal with the Fay Enchantress where they would find her to be an evil, self-centered, petty creature, especially with her tendency to like turn people into frogs with a glance. And she does punishments that come off as very petty.
Yeah.
And I would say she's very sexual. There is one of the great mysteries of Bretonnia, and this, I think this is actually worth bringing up with Morgiana, is who is Malobod's mother? Which, for those that don't know, King Lewin Leoncoeur, the great noble King Lewin, who is supposedly a perfect paragon of all that is to be human, has a bastard son out of wedlock. Even though he is said to be married, he has a bastard son with not his wife, who for some reason, when he drinks from the Grail, has a very bizarre experience where it doesn't turn him into a Grail Knight, it turns him into something else. And one of the popular theories, especially if you're going with the story of, well, the modern interpretation of the story of Mordred from Arthurian legend, is that Mordred was the bastard son of King Arthur and Morgana.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, if Morgiana is a spirit rather than an elf, she could have a child with Lewin.
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly different angle in this while simultaneously agreeing.
This is complete bullshit, by the way. Like, we don't know. I'm just throwing things out there.
My slightly different angle on it is more based on how Games Workshop writers tend to approach characters. And the vast majority of characters, especially special characters, unless they have books featured about them, tend to be asexual. Games Workshop is pretty scared of sexual stuff. They don't go near it. They find it uncomfortable, and they take an almost puritanical view. Violence is fine, sex is bad. And whenever they have characters that are focused around the idea of sex, they tend to write them relatively shallowly or move on from them very quickly when they realize what they've written, and they don't talk about them again. And the characters that do have sexuality hard-coded into them, often, to try and almost justify it, get books about them where it sort of gets extra detail, and they go, it's like this because of reason X, Y, or Z. Morgiana's had literally almost nothing written about her. Let's be blunt. There's very little out there which focuses on her perspective, her position. And I think if that were to happen, it's quite likely that someone, when they sat down and went, I want to build this into a developed character, might very well take a very different route to what most people expect. I think that she is almost certainly, if we're going to go by any of the routes, if she is a human who is Highlandering her way from life to life to life to life as she reincarnates, if we're going with that route, then you can build an interestingly asexual character out of that, purely because of the fact that everyone dies around her all the time in a strange way. You could do that quite nicely and get a character that works on that angle. But if she's a spirit, spirits tend to be much more purely emotional in how they approach things, and they tend to be pretty lusty things. Naiads and dryads are known for fucking their way through all of the elves, for example. It's what they do. We often think of dryads and we see them in the battlefield as these bark-covered hellions that are mincing everything. But back in the forest, they're having parties at big tables, and elves are at those parties, and they're having weird half-spirit elf kids and whatever the hell else is happening. And we know most of the large spiritual entities in the Warhammer world have done something similar to that. I refer you to our Durthu stream. The spirits tend to be highly sexualized in a variety of ways, and I think it's very likely if Morgiana le Fay is a spirit, then yeah, she does fuck, and probably quite a lot. And she probably has many relationships, and she's probably a character that's not as simple and as black and white as what we're portraying here. What we're portraying here is a character that we've got with the evidence from the books at hand. But behind that character is someone who's real, who has thoughts and feelings, at least real in the Warhammer world, not real in real life. But if we're building her character for, say, a roleplay version of her, we have to decide how she responds to people. And I think it's very likely, if you're doing anything that was even close to some sort of Arthurian reference, then her and Luon have been lovers. I think that is an almost cert. That's probably how certain Grail Knights even achieve where they achieve. The unwritten story for some of them as they're heading towards a purity that you don't expect. That would be an interesting twist on the story, and one that could very easily turn into someone on the outside going, do you realize what they have done? They have perverted the core of what it is to be a Grail Knight. And that could turn into the great civil war that we have as we move into the end times. You want to promote those stories. You want to get a story that makes sense when someone goes, I've seen the truth. And the truth is that these people are bad. And we all know that sex is considered to be bad by almost anyone who wants to get their opinion across in a way that makes the person who likes sex look like a bad guy. So using sex as a weapon against people who are sexual is a very common tool. And I think that that could work really well for our end times shout.
Yeah, and I will also note that if you've ever read any Black Library books, like the Knights of Bretonnia trilogy and stuff like that, the damsel characters, they fuck. Boy,
they fuck. Yeah, quite. And I think there are I think that makes sense as well when you particularly look at the courts that they come from, the court that's in the other world, a court where there's fuck all to do, probably except for learn magic and fuck. Eat. It's a giant party for eternity with Ladriel.
So I just want to grab this comment out from Spice. Says, feels like sexual themes in gaming is becoming more liberated these days, but there's always the problem with children being potentially exposed to it. So what I will say is that there is a difference between exposing, as children are growing into young adults and teenagers, and they're expanding their horizons of literature. There is nothing wrong with children coming across sexual themes in novels or books or stories because it's normal and it's human and it's part of life, and they're going through their own sexual awakenings. And it's not something that should be this weird taboo topic. Now, should they be like doing pornographic scenes in these novels? No, you just have your casual fade to blacks and you imply things. But I think romance and sexuality is a very important aspect of being human
experience. Yeah, agreed.
And the idea that it's like, oh, the children. No, like if they're reading a book where people are being like sliced open or crushed or tortured, is like that. If they're growing up and it's okay for them to be dealing with growing up themes, it doesn't need to be an explicit pornographic sex scene, but that's never what Warhammer has been trying to do. But the idea that characters just can't have sex or they can't mention the theme of sex is ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
And I think that this is a beautiful point brought up by Mornington, because it's exactly what Slaanesh thrives on. By making sex a taboo thing, it makes it something that people chase and look for. We're making it a part of the conversation about human experience. People then come to accept it as just part of what it is to be in their life. And if you try to say this is something that is disgusting and belongs over there and should never be brought near our children, for example, you have effectively say to your children that this is a bad thing. And that's when Slaanesh rises. And you also increase teenage pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you tell a kid they can't do a thing and they're immediately doing it.
Let's see. We were Proc. Listening to this stream, it seems that while Marathi Hecate use chaos magic against chaos, Morgiana / Ladriel are using human / mortal tools against chaos.
I don't think that's an unfair assessment. Because humanity is clearly chaos's greatest tool. Of that, there is no doubt. We can pose all manner of arguments for and against it if you wish, but looking at the overall picture, chaos wins because of humanity. And Ladriel has taken the choice to use chaos's greatest weapon against them. And does it fucking well, which is one of the reasons that I'm so disappointed with how Bretonnia was handled in the end times, where they basically went, that great tool, we don't even recognize it was a tool, and in fact, it's crushed. Gone.
Ross Lorimer asks, are Grail Knights Proto-Stormcast? Yes!
Yes.
If you read Stormcast lore,
hey, Ross,
they are the actual Bretonnia faction.
Yeah.
They're
they 100% are. Good shout. And of course, Ross would know this because he's been in my groups role-playing more than once, and I used to work with them.
Like, I'll
back in the day.
How do you become a Stormcast? You live a life as a human, and you do good things, and in a moment of crisis, you choose to stand up for your fellow man, be honorable, chivalrous, noble, and go die, or you're willing to lay down your life against the forces of chaos and be a hero. And Sigmar goes, you've passed the test, zap, and steals you from that moment of death and makes you, he infuses you with a piece of his godly essence and makes you into a demigod. It's literally just the fucking Lady of the Lake of the Grail Knight, but it's Sigmar.
Yeah, 100%. Sigmar is taking the model that had already been established by Ladriel, the Lady of the Lake, in Bretonnia, and running with it.
Sigmar does let them use pew-pew. That's true. He does let them shoot things. That's because
they've got a god who's got a different set of baseline values.
Yeah.
Just because they're doing a similar process doesn't mean you'll end up with the same result.
Sivalucus, Elf made Bretonnia a space marine recruiting feudal world. We could make life easier, but then they lose that killing edge. It's a bit of a stretch, but the core fundamentals make sense.
Steven, I'm not want to admit this, but I've done this.
Oh my God, Andy.
I have done almost exactly this, where there was, just to cut a very stupid, convoluted story down to its base, there was a world in 40k where many of the children that had been spirited away from Bretonnia had ended up, and the entirety of that world was so Bretonian coded, it was ridiculous, but in 40k with 40k technology, and it was indeed a Space Marine recruiting world.
Yeah, Neil in the Haystack says, this has nothing to do with GW, though. The market and the billion-dollar companies make business. Age rating equals more or less money. To change that, you must change puritanism and censorship laws. So I somewhat disagree. I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because nowadays, we see more indie things that are willing to do very adult topics that have things like new forms of violence or deeper topics or sexuality, sex scenes, but they do it in like tasteful, interesting ways, and they're making bank. The idea that
they're not doing it in tasteful ways, like Peacemaker, and it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's like the idea that it's like, oh, it's the market, the Puritans control the market. No, they don't. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It really is. Like, you just don't need to do that anymore. Now, a lot of the marketing pencil pushers that are like up in these companies that are trying to maximize revenue may be convinced that, oh no, we need to appeal to the mass market, so we need to cut out any potentially problematic themes. But that's how you could get fucked up shit where you have Disney saying, well, we can't show gay relationships because that's not mass market appeal. Fuck those guys.
I have been in a position where I've been told to edit out all manner of stuff that's just commonplace human interaction, and isn't explicit. Is just simply a statement of what life is. And I hard bought that bullshit.
Yeah, like in case you can't tell, I hate puritanical thoughts. Like that belief style. To say I loathe them is such a grotesque understatement. I'm not going to get super into it right now. But like the people who are like, well, you have to do what the common denominator of the market says, they're fucking idiots. I'll say it.
Stifling artists.
Yeah. Let art be art. And if something is like, oh, you know what? That's too racy for my kids. I don't want them dealing with that. Then be a parent and deal with it. And if your kid sees something and you're like, ooh, I'm not sure how they're going to respond to that, how about you talk to them?
That's what I did. And I think I've got quite functional kids. Thanks very much.
Sorry. That got me all fired up.
Ground yourself there.
Morgiana le Fay. It's kind of outro time, Andy.
Is it? Holy crap, already. Have we already gone 3 hours, everyone? Looks like we have. Right, so I'm going to conclude with a slightly different version of Morgiana than we started with. The Morgiana that we started with is a character that's based on Arthurian legend. And this character is flipped. Where in Arthurian legend, she's basically a bad guy. She is flipped into basically a good guy. And the version of Morgiana that we start off with is probably a human that's passing on their skills from generation to generation. Indeed, they even say that in a couple of places inside 5th edition. And then as we hit 6th edition, this character is pitched hard as an elf instead. As we move into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, it's not just pitched hard, it's confirmed. She's an elf. And the elves are doing something alongside the Lady of the Lake. As we move into the end times, that's changed. No, she's a human, actually. Remember that thing we said? No, it's not that. And by the way, now she's dead because, hey, we need her for an undead ritual. So cut a long story short, we have a character who is deeply magical, who is directly tied to and is a representation of the Lady of the Lake, and is also intrinsically linked with all of the Lady of the Lake's plans for Bretonnia. We know the Lady of the Lake is Ladriel, and we know by one step further that she is, if you go with the end times, also Lilith. I don't care what you call the god, and I don't care whether you think it's Ladriel posing as Lilith, or whether it's Lilith is just that, and she's actually an alien from another place, and she comes and she's creating her own god realm of gods to survive the end times with. It doesn't actually matter. All that matters is that we have a god. Who cares what its name is? Names don't mean much. It's just semantics. We have a god. And Morgiana le Fay is that God's representative in the material realm doing that God's work. And we have various choices as to who she actually is. And we have choices that are a variety because Games Workshop has given us multiple choices. Now we can go with she's all of them, or none of them, or one of them. Loosely, she is either a human, or a string of humans, an immortal human somehow, whether that's vampire or magic or God-given right. She's a little bit like a Stormcast Eternal. She's been given eternity ahead of her. Possibly when she dies, she comes back with some of her memories not the way they were before. There's lots of different ways we can handle a potential Morgiana. Or she is the third option that we brought up multiple times during this stream. She's one of the Fae. Now, the Fae are defined in different ways in different books, but broadly speaking, they're the spirits of Athaloran and the elves, and the conflation of the two by the Bretonnians who look at them. Second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay said that meant she was an elf. I think that there is not just a strong argument, but an almost no-brainer argument when you see all the things that she can do. That she is, in fact, a spirit. She's not really a human. That's a face she wears. She's not an elf. That's also a face that she wears. What she is a spirit, not that much different to say something like a naiad, a dryad, or possibly one of the elder spirits of the forests. And she is an elder spirit presumably tied to the waters and the mists. The very realm that Ladriel rules over, the Lady of the Lake rules over. It doesn't just fit, it makes sense, because this is also how the gods work. All of the gods, when they were interacting with the mortal realms in Warhammer, interacted directly with various spirits. That's a reason why the tree men have such close relationships with the elves, because their gods tied them together. And this spirit, if you wish to go with that route, is in many places at once, coming in and out of the waters and changing humanity in Bretonnia to be ultimately the perfect weapon that can possibly be come the end times, because there's something we also know about the elven gods. They believe in Ranadandra. They believe that the end times are coming. Their equivalent of Ragnarok, the apocalypse, whatever you want to call it. Ranadandra is when the elven gods walk the world again and go to war with the Chaos Gods directly. And they're preparing for it. They've all been preparing for it. And we have a story for Ladriel. It's very simple. There's not a lot there, but what little we have is clear. She's the only god allowed to walk the world by Azurin, the great divine creator of the elves. And Ladriel is almost certainly, it's confirmed in more than one place, the Lady of the Lake. That means that she is ultimately there attempting to do what we know the elven gods are trying to do. The story is in black and white. Ranadandra's coming. She is preparing for the coming of chaos. She's doing the job, and she's created her equivalent of the Stormcast Eternal, her Grail Knights that are chaos-killing monsters that have proven themselves in a position of weakness as a bare human and then are granted superhuman capability in one fashion or another. Each Grail Knight is unique. Some of them have very obvious, puissant powers. Others are much less so. But knights across that realm are swearing vows that make material difference to their capabilities at war because they believe strongly in what the Lady of the Lake is doing. They have created a cult that is empowered. And Morgiana le Fay is at the top. It's not the king of Bretonnia. The king of Bretonnia is the administrator of Bretonnia. Morgiana le Fay appoints the administrators. And when they fail, Morgiana le Fay doesn't step in and make them work. And immediately makes you go, but why? Surely she should be there to stop them falling. No, because falling is a core component of the human experience. And you have to win over it. You have to succeed. And only those who succeed are going to benefit from the lady's very powerful advantages. Which means that when parts of Bretonnia fall, it's actually, when this may sound somewhat odd, but it's to the benefit of Bretonnia. Because they were going to fall at some point, and it gives everyone else an opportunity to rise above it. Because Morgiana le Fay is not kind. She's not there to make everything good. She is there, ultimately, to fulfill Ladriel's purpose, the lady's purpose. And the lady's purpose, if we run with that whole story, is to prepare for Ranadandra. To prepare for the end times when the lady herself will walk out of the other world where she exists, weapons in hand, ready to take on the Chaos Gods, literally, physically, to take on Khorne with her great bank of wizards that she has been training for the last 1,500 years inside the other realm. We know she has got not just hundreds, but thousands of male wizards who are all ready to go come the end times. And that the damsels have been returning from the other world, this pocket dimension in the Aether. The damsels have been returning to continue the work of Morgiana le Fay and the lady, to get as many as possible come the end times, to get a perfect set of warriors. Of all parts of the old world, there's nothing close to Bretonnia when it comes to being a weapon against the end of the world. It's a lovely story that is fitting completely into everything that Warhammer represents, because Warhammer has always been a setting that's talking about the end of the world is coming. Now, some people don't like that because they don't want the end of the world to come. Some people dispute that's what Warhammer ever was, but it's always been that. Right from the beginning, all of its writers have loosely said, yeah, 5 minutes to midnight setting. That's basically what it is. And Bretonnia is the realm that's setting that up. It's 5 minutes to midnight, everyone, and we need to be ready. And Bretonnia is the great realm where this is almost made manifest in every part of what it is. Unlike the Empire, which is just this big mess. Bretonnia is being channeled, and the person who channels it is Morgiana le Fay, doing it on behalf of the goddess that she represents. As the goddess sits in the other realm, choosing and working her way through the very best humans that Bretonnia has to offer after 1,500 years worth of selective breeding. You could view them like I don't know, if you want, you could view them like Dune and the great sisterhood over there, who are pruning all of the lines to try and create the perfect warriors at the end of it. Because to a degree, it's what they're doing. Morgiana le Fay is not a good guy, as we understand good and bad. Such moralistic terms don't really apply to her. She is someone who has got a job to do, and she does it with absolute certainty and purpose. Not a child will slip by her if she can do anything about it. She will find every last one with the capability of magic and take it away to prepare for what is ultimately its purpose, which is either to continue the gentle push towards Bretonnia's utility in the end times, or alternatively, to be a warrior of the end times. This is the end time story we never got, because when we eventually get to the end time story, the person that wrote it went in a completely different direction, completely different, and instead made the elven gods aliens from another dimension. Instead made the story of Bretonnia the story of, well, who really cares? We don't use that faction. Let's just burn it to the ground as fast as possible and break it entirely. The end time story was weak. We all accept that, but that doesn't mean that the end time story we got couldn't be made better. We can take all of that story and conclude it with just a few simple little extra lines, which is the threat that it represented was so fucking obvious to those who are looking to try and take the world down. So they do everything in their power to attack Bretonnia. There's a reason Bretonnia goes down hardest and first, because Ladriel, for all of her mists and shadows, for all of her attempts to hide what she's doing, ultimately gets spotted. And that makes for an interesting story. We can have the same outcome, the same end, and she has to go desperate come the end time. She spins lies. She does all sorts of crazy stuff to basically get Teclis on side, to get others on side to what she sees as the potential outcome. We tell a new story using the same story beats, but we make it better. There's nothing to say that all of the end times isn't perfect. I hear a lot of you saying, Andy, you hate the end times. I do. But I also love it because I think the Warhammer world should have ended. I'm not against any of that. I think it's a great story. I just don't think it was done very well. But we can make it work. And I think one of the key characters for that is Morgiana le Fay. For me, she is one of the most underappreciated characters in Warhammer, but we say this for a lot of female characters in Warhammer. Games Workshop tends to focus on the big, strong warrior on a big, nasty beast and forget about the cool characters that they've created on the sidelines. And they might pop up as a side point in a story. They might get a little short bit or snippet here or there that suggests to the awesomeness that they could have been. But ultimately, when it comes to execution, they almost go, and the big guy with the hammer hits the other guy with the axe. And that's all the story we get. And that is deeply disappointing for the complexity that Warhammer often offers, and even more disappointing when you look at many of the novels and the complexity and the great stories that the writers are bringing to the fore that could arguably have been better as a single editor went, do you realize you also have this amazing tool over here that you could use in a different way? So my conclusion on Morgiana le Fay is great character. If you want to go with her being Le Fay, the Fay, make her a spirit. If you want to take a different route, make her an elf. If you want to go with the end times, make her a human of some sort. That's entirely up to yourself for your own games, but in my headcanon, she's almost certainly what most would refer to as a spirit.
So here's a fun thing that we get to do very uniquely for this particular episode, which is that everyone who watches this episode live or afterwards should take a bet.
Ooh.
You should write down somewhere, just for funsies, what do you think the Fay Enchantress actually is? Spirit, elf, human, because the old world has been dancing around the topic. The Fay Enchantress has been mentioned, but they explicitly have not shown her. They have not named her, and she has not appeared full on yet. So we don't know if GW is going to say, "Oop, aha, just kidding. End times isn't real. She's an elf," or if they're going to say, "Oh, I just watched this episode of Lorebeards, and they had like a really good opinion about a spirit thing. We should take that." Or if they're going to keep the end time stuff and make her human. Is she still going to be Morgiana, even though this is 200 years ago? We're about to find out. I would guess that after the War of Citrus Fury and going into second edition, we're probably going to see the Fay Enchantress make an appearance. Because so far they've given us Lady Elise Duchard, who's a prophetess, but we haven't seen the big Effie herself yet.
True. If I was to make a guess right now as to what Games Workshop was most likely to do, looking over the core books, probably human.
My money's on elf.
Interesting. Yeah, nice. Like that. I always love a slight difference.
Yeah, but we'll see. Drago Knight, that could actually be kind of cool if she is actually a spirit, but she just possesses different humans when that shell dies. That would be spicy. But anyway, so that is it for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will be back this Wednesday with something. I don't know what.
Neither do I.
Because we
watch our channels. We'll tell you. It'll be coming.
Yeah, and then next Sunday we'll be back with Bertrand the Brigand.
The Brigand. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. Very different Bretonnian angle we're going to be taking this time. A far more grounded one in the peasantry, who they are, and what Bertrand represents.
Also, before the end of today, I am going to be posting a link on the LawHammer and Loremaster of Sotek Discords and YouTube channels, and I guess Lorebeards YouTube channel. That's going to have a Google Doc link where you will be able to submit your personal headcanons and fan theories
for Saturday
about the Warhammer Fantasy Universe for this Saturday, where me and Andy will go through and review them. There will be restrictions, so please read the document before you submit it. There will be a maximum character limit or word limit, and if you go over it, I will throw it in the trash.
Ben!
So if you've ever wanted me and Andy to review your personal headcanons and say, this is great, this is terrible, what the hell were you smoking, then this Saturday will hopefully be for you. And that is it for today.
Thanks, everyone. That was an absolute ball. It's nice to dive into Bretonnia for a while. It's a faction that has been sadly maligned by Games Workshop on more than one occasion. One that barely had any material written for it officially for the core game. Only a 5th edition and 6th edition army list, and that's it. Nothing else. Out of 8 editions of Warhammer, that's just not a lot at all in the slightest. I mean, hey, we got ourselves a 3rd edition one as well, but I'm being fair. And it's really nice for us to dive into one of the characters that I think has just been forgotten, other than to use as a sacrifice in somebody else's story. She got properly fridged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. Bullshit.
All right. And man, we didn't even, that the worst part about realizing you're at the end, it's like, oh, we didn't even really talk about the other world. We didn't talk about...
I mean, we talked about it existing here and
there,
we also didn't we didn't really go into it.
The hardcore magic resistance that all the damsels in the Fay Enchantress have, because they're super anti-magic. Well, another stream, another day. See you guys then.
See y'all later. Bye.